Hey friends, tonight, let's explore the quiet lessons hidden in history. The ones not found in textbooks, but in the rhythms of daily life long ago. Let's take it slow. You might not last a single dawn in the age of crusades, lugging your armor through ankle-deep mud and sleeping on straw. Trust me, you'd be begging for mercy by noon. If tonight's story brings you a bit of stillness in a noisy world, feel free to like or subscribe, no expectations. Just an open door whenever you feel like returning. You stand at the edge of a muddy field just beyond the walls of a crowded medieval town. The air hangs heavy with the scent of damp earth sweat and rotting straw. Campfires flicker in the gathering dusk, sending trails of smoke that mingle with the sharp tang of unwashed bodies. Around you, rows of tents strain under leather armor draped over poles like metal ghosts. Every shudder of canvas carries a promised tomorrow. You march off to fight in a distant land under the banner of the cross. It's well established that thousands of European nobles and peasants alike took up the cross in the late 11th century, answering Pope Urban II's call at Clermont in 1095. They came with visions of holy glory plunder or simple escape from drought and famine at home. Estimates vary, but some chronicles suggest as many as 100,000 men assembled for the First Crusade, eager to reclaim Jerusalem. You imagine the swell of voices, Latin prayers, rhythmic trumpet calls, shouts of Deus Vult, echoing against stone walls as families wept at the gates. Beneath that grand rhetoric, however, lurked a grimmer reality. Armor that weighed nearly 60 pounds pinned your shoulders and elbows in place. Each plate and chain link dug into your flesh as you knelt to pray or tightened leather straps at dawn. A quirky detail. Some crusaders improvised padding by wrapping old sheepskins around their torsos, hoping to cushion the shock of incoming arrows. Archaeologists have found wool fragments beneath ancient mail shirts, hinting at these makeshift comfort layers, perhaps humanity's earliest attempt at ergonomic body armor. You shift your weight, feeling the cold bite of iron against your cheek, where your helmet rests askew. Beneath the clank of metal, you hear the groan of oxen struggling to haul heavy wagons laden with barley salted pork and the occasional barrel of wine. Supplies were notoriously scarce. One contemporary chronicle complains that many nights subsisted on stale hardtack soaked in river water, and even that water was often putrid, breeding dysentery among the ranks. As lantern light dances on muddied canvas, you trace your fingertip over a crudely painted cross on your surcoat, a silent vow of faith and a marker to distinguish friend from foe. It's practical, of course, but also carries meaning. You are chosen part of a divinely sanctioned army. Yet here's a whispered scholarly debate. Did those crosses reinforce unity among diverse contingents? Or did they fuel suspicion whenever banners looked unfamiliar? Some historians argue that as crusading armies swelled, regional differences in heraldry and language created confusion on the battlefield, leading to tragic friendly fire incidents. Your stomach rumbles, reminding you that rations haven't arrived for 2 days. Nearby, a ragged cook stokes a crackling fire beneath a rusted cauldron half full of thin broth. You kneel to peer inside carrots boiled soft, a few lumps of gristly meat bobbing listlessly. A half-bitten crust sits abandoned on a stump. You scoop a spoonful into your mouth, grimacing at the sour taste of overused salt. It's barely enough to keep your limbs functional, let alone your spirits. But it's not just hunger you battle. As night deepens, the cold seeps through your padded gambeson into bone. Cries rise from nearby tents as men cough feverishly. Lice crawl in beards and hair, spreading typhus among tightly packed sleepers. You scratch at a persistent itch on your calf, feeling the small pinch of a flea. One 12th century hospital register notes that some crusaders tried to ward off lice by rubbing their robes with vinegar and crushed bay leaves, an antiseptic ritual, though likely futile. You can almost smell the sharp herbal sting mingling with campfire smoke. Thunder rumbles in the distance, possible rain. Mud will thicken, wagons might bog down. Horses, starved from days without grain, shift restlessly, their flanks slick with sweat. You run a calloused hand over the knot of rope at your waist that holds your water gourd still half full of brackish river water. Tomorrow's march will start before dawn, the trumpets jerking you from a fitful sleep. Tonight's gentle reflection. The allure of religious zeal and adventure often mask the brutal conditions that crusaders endured daily. Armor, far from heroic glimmer, could be a metal cage, holy fervor, a salve for hunger and disease. Each gritty detail, a makeshift sheep wool liner, a vinegar-soaked tunic, a half-rotted crust, shapes our understanding beyond grand epics. As you settle beneath a threadbare blanket, you wonder, were these extreme hardships seen as part of a divine trial? Or did men question their faith when faced with relentless discomfort? Let that question linger like embers in a dying campfire, warming you with its flicker as you drift toward sleep. You push aside the canvas flap of your tent and take a deep breath, but smoke isn't the first thing you notice. The stench of uncovered latrine waste and mounded garbage around camp assaults your senses before any hint of fire. You curl your toes to avoid the slick black puddles, what the guards jokingly call the health reservoir, where dysentery and typhoid dwell together like unwanted guests. One common fact, sanitation during the Crusades was virtually non-existent. Towns and fortresses along the pilgrimage routes had no proper sewers or latrines. Scattered rains turned human waste and trash into a muddy sludge that washed through the dug-up streets. With each season, disease spread swiftly amid these filthy conditions. You tread carefully, feeling cold muck seep through your worn boots. Leather footwear became pointless when waterlogged. Underfoot, the edge of a black pool shimmers in the campfire light like an oil slick. Soldiers follow narrow ropes to pull their feet free, groaning as foul clay sticks to every step, a quirky detail to prevent skin cracks from constant dampness. Some men scrape their filthy feet with brittle wood shards or dried shell fragments. Imagine the tiny creaks as shells gouged your soles, an abrasive worse than any modern exfoliant. Chronicles from Acre occasionally record infections. From this practice, small scratches becoming festering sores. That rancid odor blends with wood smoke from campfires and the musty scent of jerky hanging to dry. As your column moves each evening, you halt near a flooded field or scrub thicket to pit tents. Space is cramped. Dozens share a single bucket of water to wash faces, hardly enough to scrub off the grime. You glance at muddy ceramic basins, scummed and bubbling, where lice and even beetle larvae drift in the filth. A lesser-known truth, cholera, and typhoid did not spare officers. That stagnant runoff trickled along walkways, infecting open wounds or mucous membranes. Crude records claim entire companies vanished overnight, not by sword, but by convulsing fevers that claimed them before a cry for help could escape. You bend to scoop a spoonful of water from the foul drainage ditch near the guard huts. Heat rises from the stagnant pool, carrying the must of rot and spoiled rations left under crumbling fortress walls. Faced with a choice between gut-wrenching illness and thirst, you may sip it, knowing full well the consequences. You taste the gritty sludge and clay, a flavor that erases any memory of clean rivers. In one corner, you spot small ceramic flasks half buried in dry earth. Field surgeons carried lime powder in these bullet jars, smearing it on wounds as a crude antiseptic. Excavations in Jerusalem uncovered pots with charred residues, confirming this folk remedy. But did the lime really prevent infection, or merely dry the skin until it cracked even more painfully? You smear streaks of lime up your calf, an uncomfortable sting like low-voltage shocks. A fellow soldier hisses, keeps it dry, stops flies from laying eggs. His words mingle with insect hum and comrades' groans. Some wrapped wounds in honey-soaked cloth, honey's antibacterial reputation offering hope, if no guarantee of healing. As darkness deepens, temperatures plunge. Mediterranean nights are surprisingly cold. You curl into your damp cloak ears, still ringing with moans and the crackle of dying embers. Giant cockroaches skitter across your legs, jolting you upright. A few men tuck garlic-scented sachets under their caps, an olfactory shield against insects, though it mostly just made tents smell like raw garlic. Amid the groans and buzz, you murmur a short prayer, begging that no new plague finds you by dawn. You think of the peasant maidens back in Europe, blissfully unaware of the stink and squalor of a crusader's camp. Some pilgrims saw these hardships as tests of faith, a trial by filth on the way to the Holy Land. Yet modern historians still debate, did such horrific conditions strengthen crusaders' piety, or did they see deep doubts when death came from disease rather than noble battle? Some argue that suffering forged unshakable faith. Others insist many abandoned religious zeal, turning to folk superstitions like sprinkling salt on wounds. Finally, you burrow into your moldy bedding, the last embers glow fading. The groans and insect chorus swirl in your mind like restless spirits. You let that question drift flickering like a dying flame as you slip into a restless sleep, enveloped by the stench of mud and lime. You rise before dawn, the world still hushed beneath a veil of cool mist. Your shoulders ache before you even step out of the tent, weighted by the mass of your gear. Beneath your arm rests a kite shield, its wood rimmed with iron, the paint chipped by rough handling. Across your back, your sword scabbard hangs heavily, its leather swollen from the damp night air. Straps tug at your chest, holding a rolled-up gambeson that feels more like a half-built wall than a padded shirt. A well-established fact, a fully equipped crusader could carry up to 60 pounds of armor and supplies into the field. Between the hauberk helmet shield sword and the pouches slung at your belt, that weight presses down on you like a silent oath. Even seasoned knights murmured that the first step out of camp felt as if the world itself resisted their passage. You unbuckle a leather satchel and peer inside a portion of salted pork wrapped in oiled cloth, a small loaf of biscuit-hard bread, and a flask of murky water. These meager rations must last until the next forage, which may be days away. You cradle the satchel as though it holds priceless jewels, because to you in this moment, it does. A quirky detail. Some crusaders dyed their cloth wraps in red ochre to mask bloodstains, thinking it would preserve their honor, even if they were wounded. When you glance down at your gear, You note a faded reddish haze along the strap where your gambeson caught sweat and grime. Could that have been intentional camouflage or simply evidence of too many nights spent sleeping in the camp's filth? Archaeologists have found fragments of ochre-dyed linen alongside chain mail and burial sites, suggesting this practice was more than a rumor. You hoist the shield onto your left arm, feeling its familiar weight settle into your forearm's groove. It creaks softly as you rotate it, the iron rims rasping against the leather grip. With each movement, you sense the shield's memory imprinted in tiny dents and gouges, scars from past skirmishes and training drills. When you swing your arm, the shield's momentum carries it forward, reminding you how much extra effort each step will demand. Beyond the physical strain, there's a mental toll. Every mile covered beneath this burden becomes a test of will. You steady your breath, inhaling the earthy scent of dew-laden fields and trampled grass. The quiet murmur of the camp waking around you offers solace. Horse hooves clopping softly on damp ground, the rattle of armor as men adjust belts, the clink of metal pouches being secured. A commonly cited detail to ease the load crusaders' sometimes redistributed gear among squires and pack animals. Yet those beasts, mules, and oxen were themselves prone to exhaustion and illness. Records from the Third Crusade tell of entire caravans coming to a halt because pack animals collapsed under the weight or ate poisonous plants along the roadside. You picture a fallen mule, its legs kicking gently in its final throes, and wonder whether the price of human comfort was simply transferred to another creature's suffering. With shield in place, you reach for your sword's hilt. The leather-wrapped grip feels familiar in your palm, a promise of protection and prowess. Yet the sword's weight, though lighter than the shield, still tugs at your wrist like a hungry thing. You slip it free and give it a tentative swing, listening to how the blade sings through the cool morning air. Its honed edge glints with pale anticipation. You sheath the sword and settle the gambeson more snugly against your torso. The overlapping layers of quilted linen cushion the sting of shifting straps, but only just. You press a hand against your side, feeling the faint touch of sweat and the prickle of goose flesh as dawn's chill lingers. As you stride away from camp, the first light strikes your helm, casting a muted gleam across the flat plains ahead. Each step is deliberate. You roll your feet from heel to toe, allowing your ankles and calves to absorb the burden. Yet with every footfall, the weight reverberates up your legs, settling in your lower back like a relentless knot. Among the supplies strapped to your belt, you find a small pouch of dried figs, your only concession to sweetness. You pull one free and bite into its wrinkled flesh. The intensely sweet, chewy fruit provides a momentary reprieve from bland pork and hardtack. It's a fleeting joy, a luxury that reminds you of home orchards and sun-warmed branches far behind. Here's a subtle aside. Some crusaders carried comfort bags filled with personal tokens, perhaps a scrap of cloth from a loved one, a polished pebble, or strands of a mother's hair. While there's scant physical evidence of these items in the archaeological record, contemporary letters mention knights clutching small keepsakes during battle for courage. You finger the interior of your mantle and feel the hidden pouch containing a folded piece of parchment with a hand-drawn cross, no words, only a symbol of faith meant to steady your heart. When the world thundered around you, you pause at a shallow stream, setting down your shield and sword beside the bank. The water glides over smooth stones, murmuring secrets as it flows. You kneel, dipping cupped hands into the cool current and letting the water sluice over your feet and ankles. The relief is immediate and profound. The fetid stench of camp sludge is replaced by the fresh, clean scent of running water. You splash your face, wiping away the grime and tension etched into your skin. Yet, even this respite comes at a price. You know that any pause lengthens your day's march and tests your companion's patience. The knights behind you murmur complaints as they stand in line to refill their water skins. You offer a sympathetic nod, knowing that each man's struggle under the same load binds you together in silent solidarity. Tonight's gentle question drifts into your mind as you strap your gear back on when we bear heavy burdens, literal or metaphorical. Does shared hardship forge deeper bonds, or does it amplify individual pain until each person fights alone? Scholars still debate whether the communal effort of crusading strengthened social cohesion or merely concealed fractures that emerged under stress. You heft your shield once more, feeling its weight settle against your forearm. The day's march awaits each step, a negotiation between body gear and determination. As the sun climbs higher, you breathe steadily, letting the rhythm of footsteps become a mantra. The burden you carry becomes both trial and testament, proof of your resolve and reminder of the fine line between endurance and collapse. With that thought lingering like an echo beneath your armor, you begin the slow march forward, each step forging the story you will carry into tomorrow's dawn. You trudge uphill along a narrow causeway, the morning sun already baking the rocky slope. Beneath your boots, loose stones clatter and tumble, forcing careful footwork as you climb. Your shield's weight pulls at your arm, and your sword scabbard brushes against your thigh with each step, while sweat beads on your brow despite the chill wind. Before you looms the fortress wall, its gray stone blocks, hewn from the mountain's mortar, cracked and crumbling in spots. Somewhere above, archers stand watch, their arrows at the ready. It's a well-documented fact that many Crusaders' sieges targeted hilltop castles designed to dominate the valleys below. Scaling ladders and siege towers were ordinary implements of war, yet none felt as perilous as hauling your own gear up a steep incline under enemy fire. You imagine the thud of crossbow bolts embedding in stone around you, the sharp crack of splintering wood when a ladder rung gives way, and the shouts of commanders urging you on. A gritty detail, some desperate soldiers coated their shields with animal fat to help arrows glance off or to ignite flaming arrows more safely. Archaeological digs near Crusader sites have recovered bronze arrowheads embedded in charred wooden shields, suggesting this brutal improvisation. You glance down at your own shield, noting dark streaks where soot and grease mingled, evidence of past defenses against fire as much as steel. Halfway up, you find a narrow ledge where a makeshift camp stands. Portable kettles hang over small fires, and you see more than a dozen men clustered together, swapping ragged bread and thin stew. The air here tastes of scorched herbs and boiled beans. You crouch with them, inhaling the acrid scent and dipping your spoon into watery broth flecked with marrow bits. Hunger gnaws at your stomach, but the welcome warmth of food and camaraderie staves off despair, if only for a moment. Here's a curious side note: during prolonged sieges, knights sometimes recorded graffiti on wall stones when no papyrus was at hand. Scratchings in Norman French names, crude prayers, even jokes survive in some castles today. You can almost hear a weary crusader carving Guillaume était ici. Guillaume was here as a reminder to posterity that he too once clawed at rock for a cause. You rise and resume your crawl upward. Stones shift, and your sword tip scrapes against rough masonry, sending sparks skittering like startled insects. Each breath becomes laborious as you negotiate the narrow path. Above you, hear defenders counting the attackers, the clink of arrowheads knocked in rhythm, ready for release. Reaching the wall's base, you brace your shield against the stone and look up. A section of battlement offers a narrow embrasure just wide enough to peer through. You prop yourself there and peer into the courtyard beyond. Sunlight glints on banners bearing unfamiliar heraldry, and you spot a row of gleaming pikes, bristling like a porcupine. The defenders move with disciplined precision, their armor polished, and their stance confident. A debated point among historians: did Crusader soldiers respect the skill of Muslim engineers who built these fortifications, or did they dismiss them as mere obstacles? Contemporary Crusader letters sometimes express grudging admiration for stonework so precise that ladders slipped off smooth walls. You feel that respect mixed with dread, knowing you must find a way over or through. Your momentary reconnaissance is shattered by a sudden screech. A firepot hurled from above lands with a crash against the far wall. Flames leap and smoke billows mixing with dust as defenders shout alarms. Archers loosed a volley that whistles past your head, one bolt thudding into your shoulder strap, jolting you hard enough to rattle your teeth. Pain flares, but you clamp your teeth against a grunt, steady your breathing, and grasp your sword hilt. Now comes the true test. A wooden siege ladder stands propped at a 45-degree angle against the wall, its rungs worn but intact. You grip the side rails smooth from use and place a boot on the first rung. The ladder creaks under your weight, the rope lashings groaning. Around you, others follow suit, a slow chain of men ascending into danger. Each rung brings you closer to the top and closer to point-blank arrows and boiling oil. You recall that some crusaders stuffed wool into gaps between shields to muffle the clank of metal, hoping to move more quietly. You adjust your shield padding, testing its silence before hoisting it onto your back. As you near the top, defenders jab with pikes to push you off. You lean in, using your shield's edge to deflect and swing your sword low to strike at spear shafts. The metal clang is deafening in the confined space, but each strike buys you another heartbeat of progress. Finally, you hoist yourself over the rampart with a grunt clambering onto the wall's broad walkway. The courtyard spills out before you, a jumble of tents, horses, and debris. Your comrades surge through the breach, shouting as they engage defenders in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The clamor of steel on steel, the roar of men, and the acrid smoke of burning wood fill the air. You tighten your grip on the sword and charge forward, steeling yourself for the chaos that awaits. Tonight's thoughtful question emerges from the frenzy when courage and desperation collide on a ladder against a fortress wall. What determines victory? The strength of the wall, the will of the attacker, or the ingenuity of engineering on both sides? Scholars still argue whether medieval sieges favored defense or offense, and whether the legendary bravery of knights mattered more than the marvels of military architecture. As the din of battle envelops, you let that question swirl in your mind like embers in the dark. Each glowing thought a reminder that history's turning points often hinge on the thin line between success and ruin. You wake before dawn again, the rasp of the morning breeze doing little to clear the lingering taste in your mouth. Last night's stew replays on your tongue, thin gray and streaked with grit. Your stomach growls in protest, but you know better than to expect anything more appetizing. Around you, fellow crusaders shuffle toward the makeshift kitchen, their faces pinched by hunger and the dull realization that another day begins with the same unappealing prospect. A well-known fact, crusader rations were notoriously meager and often stale. Hardtack, an unyielding biscuit of flour water and salt, served as bread crushed into crumbs for porridge or chewed like sawdust. Meat, when available, came salted or dried, sometimes tainted by pests. Contemporary accounts lament that soldiers gnawed on hardtack so long their teeth cracked, casting shards aside like broken promises of nourishment. You step barefoot onto the cold, uneven stones that serve as your camp's cobblestone floor. Beneath your feet, dampness seeps through your thin boots, mingling with stray animal droppings and the occasional puddle of murky water. As you approach the cooking fire, the morning's first smells hit you: rancid pork fat congealing in a battered cauldron grain, boiled beyond recognition, and the faintest whiff of mold from last week's stale bread. A curious detail: some crusaders attempted to mask the taste of rancid meat by steeping it in vinegar or wine, hoping the acidity would cut through mildew. You watch one cook ladle broth over chunks of grayish meat, stirring in a splash of vinegar until the liquid froths. The result is no savory stew, but a sour concoction that clings to the back of your throat like regret. You crouch beside a low fire ring, cupping your hands over the flames to warm them. A fellow soldier offers you a spoon he's cleaned with river water itself, a dubious improvement. You accept it, gratefully dipping into the broth. The spoon scrapes against the pot's scorched bottom, dislodging black flakes that float in your bowl. You lift that spoonful to your lips, tasting the brine of sweat and metal, the curved filth of overused salt. It's sustenance enough to keep you upright, nothing more. Amid this grim routine, a whispered scholarly debate emerges. Some historians argue that poor rations slowed crusader armies more than enemy resistance did, turning hunger into one of the greatest threats on campaign. Others maintain that these shortages fostered resilience and camaraderie, shared suffering, forging an unbreakable bond. You chew slowly, feeling that bond as you swallow each gritty mouthful alongside your brothers in arms. Beside you, a cook unwraps a loaf of hardtack wrapped in cloth. He taps it against a stone, trying to break off a chunk. The crash echoes like a hammer striking iron. He offers you a jagged piece thicker than your thumb and flecked with tiny black holes, signs of weevil infestation. You inspect one hole, imagining larvae wriggling inside before you pop the bread into your mouth. Each bite crunches with insect shells and brittle dough, a texture that reminds you of razor wire scraping marrow. You recall a quirky footnote from a monk's journal when hardtack was nearly inedible. Some crusaders crushed it into a paste and cooked it with beans or lentils, creating a dish they called soldier's porridge. It might have been marginally more palatable, but if the grain was moldy, that porridge risked turning belly aches into full-blown dysentery. If you survived that, you considered yourself fortunate. The camp's makeshift bakery offers no better hope. A small oven fashioned from mud bricks and scavenged stones smokes gently, but its sole batch of loaves baked days ago. The bread inside radiates a stale warmth. When torn open, its crumb snaps like carbonized wood. Slices become spongy boards used to sop up broth, or wrap hunks of meat, between which even the hardiest soldier hesitates. Your own satchel holds a handful of dried fruits, a dozen shriveled grapes, and 3 brittle figs. You unwrap one fig, its surface cracked and powdery. The first taste floods your mouth with pure sweetness, a momentary reprieve from despair. But it's fleeting. You finish it quickly, the sticky residue reminding you how little comfort you found since departing home. A lesser-known remedy, some soldiers carried sacks of charcoal to filter rancid water or quell stomach cramps from bad food. They drop a handful into their flask, let it settle, and pour off clearer liquid. You shake your gourd watching soot and grit swirl, then pour carefully into your mouth. The charcoal's dry, dusty grain scratches your throat, but it settles the acidic churn in your gut, an abrasive balm. As the sun rises, you join a line waiting for fresh water from a communal well. The bucket's rope frays, and you feel the weight of the draw straining against the wooden axle. When water finally fills the pail, you breathe in its earthy scent dust and algae and drink deeply. Each sip washes away bits of grit, though the aftertaste lingers like a broken promise. Across the camp, you overhear merchants selling luxury items, salted fish, preserved in olive oil, a precious rarity. Their barrels glint in the sun. A few knights pool coins meant to buy favors, not fish, and barter for a small piece. The taste of that oily fish, they say, rivals any feast in Europe. You watch them pass morsels around, their expression softening as salt and brine awaken memories of coastal taverns and fresh catches. You consider that modest splurge. Is it worth the coin when coins are scarce? Is the fleeting pleasure of something fresh more sustaining than the bread and broth that every man will share? You tuck the question away alongside the memory of brined fish and return to your own squalid bowl. Tonight's reflective question drifts across your thoughts as you trudge back to the line of tents when the body endures relentless hunger and grime do small comforts, sweet figs, filtered water, a taste of salted fish shine brighter, or do they only highlight the surrounding misery? And would you risk dwindling resources for a momentary taste of home, or cling to every crumb as if it were gold? You finish the last of your porridge, mindful of the crumbs that cling to your beard and cloak. With that, you muster the will to face another day, boots on muddy ground, sword at your side, and the echo of that question guiding your steps toward tomorrow's march. You wake before sunrise, the horizon still brushed with cool, violet light. A damp hush settles over camp as you swing your legs out from under your cloak. Your muscles protest from yesterday's march, but a different pain grips you now, a buzzing in your temples and a chill creeping down your spine. You draw in a shaky breath, tasting the sharp tang of dirt and sweat, and press a hand to your forehead. It feels fever hot, as if fire smolders just beneath your skin. A well-established fact, malaria was rampant around some crusader encampments, especially near marshy riverbeds and coastal lagoons. No one knew then that mosquitoes carried the disease. They blamed bad air miasma for the fevers, chills, and sweats that felled entire units overnight. You stumble to a shallow pool of stagnant water once used for washing gear and catch your reflection, hollow cheeks, glazed eyes, and a sheen of sweat that never dries. You steady yourself against a nearby wagon wheel, inhaling the musty scent of damp wood and rotting straw. Each breath trembles through your chest like a wind chime caught in a sudden breeze. You dip your fingers into the muddy water and press them to your temples, coaxing relief from the cool paste. It soothes briefly, but the shaking returns with a vengeance, your teeth chattering in a rhythm that matches distant hoofbeats. A curious detail, some crusaders believed rubbing riverbank otter dung thought to repel insects onto exposed skin would ward off the poisonous air that caused the fevers. Excavations near Acre uncovered small leather pouches with otter droppings still inside, suggesting at least a handful of soldiers tried this bizarre remedy. You shudder, imagining its slimy warmth, yet half of you considers it worth a try to stop the internal shuddering. You press a wooden flask to your lips, tipping brackish water past cracked teeth. Each swallow feels like gulping shards of glass, but it's enough to steady the haze clouding your vision. Around you, comrades move with similar stiffness. Some collapse beside tents, others leaning on crutches improvised from broken lances. The camp grinds onward, but every step now threatens to topple you into delirium. Beyond the tents, the faint trill of a recorder drifts across the air, an itinerant minstrel attempting to lift spirits. You listen to the gentle wavering notes, and for a moment, the fever's clutch loosens. Music was as critical as prayer to crusading armies, songs of saints, laments, and refrains meant to soothe both mind and body. You imagine that tune swirling through your bloodstream, disrupting the fever's pattern like a breeze dissipating a black cloud. Yet another odd snippet some nights carried handfuls of crushed West African ginger, prized for its warming quality. They gnawed on it throughout the day, hoping to strengthen their humors against chill. One crusader diary mentions tiny ginger burns mouth sores that formed when the spice was too hot. You fish a fragment of dried root from your pouch and chew it gingerly. The fiery heat spreads across your tongue, sparking a ritual comfort even as it singes the insides of your cheeks. At midday, a makeshift infirmary springs to life under a linen canopy. Beneath it, a bearded monk sprinkles cold vinegar onto cloths and presses them to the foreheads of fevered men. You crawl toward him, desperation lending speed to your faltering limbs. He meets your eyes with calm urgency, wrapping a cloth against your brow. The vinegar's sour sharpness cuts through the heat, and you close your eyes as if tasting tart green apples. In one corner, a scribe records names in a ledger, some marked with crosses, others with lines. The crosses signal men expected to recover the lines, those likely to succumb. You feel a chill colder than any fever when you realize your name wavers between those marks. You trace your gaze to the scribe's quill, letting the gentle scratch of tip on parchment anchor you in reality. A modern debate surfaces did medieval medical practices, bloodletting herbal poultices, and vinegar compresses genuinely improve outcomes, or did they prolong suffering? Some historians argue these methods offered limited relief, while others suggest that the placebo effect and careful nursing by lay brothers provided the true healing power. You lean back against a wooden post, pondering whether hope itself counts as medicine. As dusk falls, the campfire's glow flickers across rows of huddled figures. You inhale the smoky perfume of burning olive pits and dried rosemary scents chosen to purify the air of evil humors. You sip a bitter brew of chamomile and rue stirred into tepid water by a monk whose gentle murmur makes the mixture taste like warm honey mixed with ash. It settles in your stomach, an odd comfort that seems both healing and ominous. Night deepens, and the stars blink coldly above. You lie on a pallet of straw, your body trembling in fever dreams. Figures drift across your field of vision, armored silhouettes, bean soup vapors, the scribe's ledger dancing in piscine patterns. You wrap a coarse wool cloak around yourself, pressing it tight against shivering limbs, listening to the intermittent coughs around you. Tonight's reflective question drifts like smoke through your mind when illness strikes a large group so indiscriminately. Does shared suffering strengthen solidarity? Or does it erode the bonds of comradeship as fear and death loom? Scholars still dispute whether disease forged tighter ties among crusaders or revealed fractures in loyalty and faith. As the night's cold mingles with fever's heat, let that question rest in your thoughts like a single star shimmering through a veil of clouds. You awaken to the scent of incense drifting through the morning mist, its sweet smoke curling around your face like a whispered prayer. The embers of last night's campfire glow faintly beneath ash, and your fellow crusaders stir rubbing bleary eyes as they fasten crosses around their necks. Today, faith not sword or shield will guide you through unseen dangers as surely as any fortress wall. A well-known fact, religious rites and superstitions profoundly shaped Crusader life. Before each march, banners bearing the image of Christ were blessed by priests and soldiers, knelt to receive holy water on brow and armor. These rituals offered more than spiritual comfort. They bolstered morale, assuring men they marched under divine protection. You remember dipping your gauntlets into the cool font, feeling droplets slide between metal links, each a tiny vow of faith. Yet beneath those solemn ceremonies lay a tapestry of peculiar beliefs. In one corner of camp, a group of knights holds vigil before a carved wooden statue of St. George. They anoint the statue's base with oil and whisper incantations, convinced the saint's spirit will manifest as a phantom steed on the battlefield. A quirky detail, some crusaders claimed they glimpsed a spectral horseman charging ahead at dawn, its hooves muffled on soft earth. Chroniclers recorded these sightings in the margins of prayer books, though modern scholars debate whether fatigue or collective expectation conjured these visions. You move among tents where talismans hang from leather straps, worn parchments inscribed with crosses, bits of palm frond from Jerusalem's sacred groves, and small pouches of ground clay from the Jordan riverbank. Pilgrims believed these items held miraculous power, warding off arrows, healing wounds, or turning aside demons. You fasten a pouch to your belt, the rough leather cool against your side, and wonder whether its comfort is spiritual or merely psychological. Midday sun warms the dusty ground as you join a procession to a temporary chapel, a hastily erected tent draped in crimson cloth. Inside, the air hums with whispered Latin. Incense curls upward in thin columns. A priest raises a chalice of consecrated wine, and you drink deeply tasting bitter grape and hallowed promise. Many crusaders swore that this sacrament granted renewed strength, its warmth coursing through veins dulled by hunger and fatigue. But midday faith gives way to evening superstition. After dusk, torches line the camp's perimeter, their flickering flames dancing across battered helmets and tattered surcoats. Around each flame, groups gather to share omens, a bird's screech signaling imminent attack, a stray dog's howl foretelling illness, or the shape of smoke rings rising to the night sky. One odd belief held that if you saw 3 smoke rings in quick succession, you would meet your maker before dawn. You stare at the hearth's embers, watching pale rings drift upward, your heart thudding at each sigh of wood and fire. An unexpected practice thrived among those who could neither read nor pray. Some soldiers carved crosses and runes into spear shafts or shield rims, hoping to imbue their weapons with extra potency. In the fields outside, camp excavations have uncovered spear fragments etched with crosses so crudely drawn they resemble spiders. Modern archaeologists debate whether these markings were sincere prayers or crude doodles intended to amuse bored soldiers, yet the line between devotion and distraction often blurred in the long hours of waiting. You tread carefully toward the latrine area, mindful that even mundane acts carried superstitions. Crusaders believed that the first use of a public latrine beyond the camp's edge angered spirits dwelling in the earth, inviting bad luck. To counter this, they tossed a handful of dirt into the pit afterward, uttering a brief blessing. You drop your dirt and whisper, Dominus vobiscum, the earth's cold grit falling between your fingers like a tiny penitence. In the quiet of twilight, you visit the camp's healer, a monk whose reputation rests on both piety and peculiar remedies. He crushes a handful of wolf-spaned leaves, murmuring prayers as he stirs them into a poultice. This wards off malevolent spirits, he explains, pressing the paste to the inside of your elbow. The cool, tingling sensation spreads through your arm, reminding you that some potions soothed as much by touch as by chemistry. You feel his rough fingers tracing a cross over the paste, each motion a silent invocation. A scholarly question flickers like candlelight. Did Crusader superstitions arise from genuine belief in the supernatural, or from practical attempts to make sense of unpredictable dangers? Some historians argue these practices underpin cohesion, shared rituals uniting men of diverse backgrounds. Others contend they masked anxieties about disease, desertion, and mortality, offering illusions of control when real power lay beyond human grasp. As the final light fades, a lone bugler sounds, taps its notes hollow in the cooling air. You march to your tent, clutched your talismans close, aware that tomorrow's trials will test both faith and steel. You slip beneath your cloak, feeling the pouches and parchments shift against your side, each a talisman against fear. Outside, torchlight pulses against the night, guarding dreams as fiercely as watchful archers. Short suggestion: consider breaking longer sentences into two for clearer pacing and impact. You trudge uphill along a narrow causeway, the morning sun already baking the rocky slope. Beneath your boots, loose stones clatter and tumble, forcing careful footwork as you climb. The air is thin here, flavored with pine resin and the sting of cold wind that bites exposed skin. Each breath carries the crisp promise of altitude and the warning that one misstep could send you tumbling down cliffs strewn with broken spears and splintered shields. A well-documented fact, many Crusader campaigns traversed rugged passes in Anatolia and the Levant, where armies risked storms, rock slides, and ambush by mounted archers. Caravans of pack animals balked at narrow trails, sending baggage mules crashing into ravines. Contemporary chronicles tell of knights who fell to their deaths while scouting ahead, their screams swallowed by the mountain's echoing silence. You lean on your shield's edge for support as you ascend a steep, scree slope. Stones tumble with a low rumble, and you catch a cascade of grit in your gauntlet. Your boots slip, forcing you to dig your toes into the slope and clutch the shield's rim for purchase. The shield's leather grip glows softly beneath your calloused hand, reminding you that even this heavy burden can offer a lifeline when you least expect it. A curious detail: some crusaders affixed small iron spikes to their boot soles, hoping to improve traction on slippery slopes. Though rare, a few archaeological finds show hobnails worn unevenly, suggesting spikes were driven in later by soldiers unwilling to admit their boots lacked grip. You wonder if the uneven spacing of spikes helped or hindered them when scrambling up loose rock, perhaps more hazard than help. You press forward, stepping over thorny bushes whose sap oozes sticky amber when branches snap. The resin clings to your gambeson, leaving dark stains that won't wash out until you reach a river. The bush's bristly leaves scratch your arms, reminding you that every inch of these hills fights back. A sudden gust sends a swirl of dust across the trail, stinging your eyes and forcing you to blink tears into your scarf. Midway up, the path narrows into a ledge barely wide enough for two men abreast. One misstep and you'll pitch headlong down a sheer drop. You pause to steady your breath, feeling the wind buffet your cloak so fiercely you fear it might pull you off balance. Behind you, shouts rise as pack animals struggle to follow their hooves, slipping and clacking against stone. You grip your sword hilt, ready to steady any mule that stumbles, and braced for the sickening thud if it falls. Here's a debated point among historians. Some argue Crusader armies should have used local guides familiar with mountain routes, while others insist language barriers and mistrust made foreign guides impractical. Chroniclers note that many guides betrayed their employers, leading troops into ambushes or impassable terrain. You scan the rocky outcrops, half expecting to see Ottoman archers peeking from behind boulders, bows drawn and ready. At a narrow choke point where two cliffs converge, your column halts. Ahead stands a rock face dotted with handholds carved centuries ago, an ancient service path used by local merchants. The handholds are worn smooth indentations, shaped like shallow cups in the limestone. You press your fingers into a dip and feel the cold, granular stone seep into your skin. Each crevice offers tenuous purchase as you hoist yourself upward, muscles straining with the shift from marching to climbing. A little-known anecdote: some crusaders lowered themselves along these paths using coiled horsehair ropes, swapping heavy armor for lighter leather jerkins and leggings to ease movement. Fragments of dyed rope found in cliffside shrines suggest a few knights risked shedding mail for agility, an act considered near heretical by peers who equated armor with divine protection. You tuck that thought away as you brace your shield against the rock, using it as a makeshift platform for your boot. Halfway up the face, the sun breaks through swirling clouds, casting a shaft of light onto a small alcove. Inside, you see crudely carved graffiti Arabic script and Latin crosses scrawled side by side. Judging by the depth of weathering, these marks predate the latest campaign's evidence that pilgrims and traders of different faiths once shared this precarious route. You trace a cross with a fingertip, imagining the hands that carved it and the prayers offered for safe passage. As you top the cliff, a sudden spray of metal shards rattles against stone above, harassing arrows meant to deter climbers. You duck behind a jutting boulder, feeling one arrow scrape past your helmet's rim. Its fletching catches on the rock, and you wrench it free, noting the jagged tear in the feather. Your heart pounds, but you fire a return bolt from your crossbow, its shaft thunking deep into unseen rock. Combat here is impersonal, each side hurling missiles in the hope that fewer foes reach the summit. You scramble over the lip and find yourself on a broad plateau, blanketed in low scrub and wild thyme. The sun's warmth returns, releasing a heady perfume that masks sweat and dust. Below, valleys stretch toward distant peaks, their ridges fading into blue haze. A hush falls as men rest scrips opened for scraps of bread bottles uncorked for sips of water. Silence amid such beauty feels like an unexpected blessing. Tonight's reflective question emerges as you settle. When armies cross the most treacherous ground, does terrain shape tactics more than training? Or do soldiers learn to master nature's obstacles with human ingenuity? Do you credit the spikes in your boots and the handholds carved by merchants, or the stubborn will that pushes you beyond every edge? You lean back against your shield, tasting the thyme on warm air, letting the plateau's hush settle in your bones. Each breath reminds you that the narrowest ridge can both impede your march and reveal the world's expanse if you dare to climb. You break camp at dawn, the chill of the high plains biting through threadbare cloaks. Before you lies a vast open field, dotted with brittle tufts of grass, a place where enemy scouts once trampled the land before vanishing into haze. Your boots sink slightly into dew-soaked soil, each step releasing the damp scent of earth and crushed vegetation. Overhead, pale light spreads like spilled milk, revealing distant hills where watchtowers perch like silent sentinels. A well-established fact, open field engagements during the Crusades often hinged on infantry forming shield walls against cavalry charges. Foot soldiers locked shields edge to edge, creating a bristling barrier of wood and iron, an immovable line meant to blunt the momentum of thunderous hooves. You adjust your grip on your kite shield, the iron rim cold and reassuring beneath calloused fingers. Yet today, there's no immediate clash, only the steady march of your column toward rumored enemy positions. A curious detail veteran sergeant sometimes ordered men to tie small bells to their armor joints. The jingling warns comrades of approaching riders in tall grass, and some believed unsettles enemy horses unused to European sounds. You hear faint tinkling as knights stride ahead, a mechanical chime against the morning hush. You pause at the field's edge where a lone shepherd's hut stands, its whitewashed walls cracked and stained. Smoke curls from a tiny chimney. Someone still dwells here despite war's sweep. You enter cautiously, sword sheathed and boots squelching on packed dirt. Inside, a weathered woman kneads dough beside a hearth. Her eyes widen at your arrival, but she offers a nod and a chunk of coarse bread baked in ashes. You taste its smoky warmth, simple sustenance that anchors you more surely than any hardtack. A lesser-known anecdote, local peasants sometimes guided crusaders through grazing lands in exchange for food or promises of protection. Yet many guides withdrew when armies approached enemy strongholds, fearful of retribution. The woman's silent retreat to the back room speaks volumes. You suspect she'll vanish before you can repay her kindness. You leave a handful of silver coins on the table, the metal cold in your palm, then step back into the field's graying expanse. Ahead, your sergeant calls for formation. You and fellow footmen lock shields in a straight line, bracing against the breeze. Helmets mask your faces, but you feel the shared tension, each man's heartbeat a muted drum. In gaps between shields, spears extend outward points aimed at invisible foes. The ground underfoot seems to hum with anticipation. A known tactic, feigned retreats, lured enemy knights into breaking formation only for hidden infantry to pivot and strike flanks. You recall drilling that maneuver on training grounds. Some found it dishonorable, others pragmatic. Today's orders are simple. Hold the line and wait for cavalry support. You tighten your elbow against the shield, leaning your weight into the wooden board, as if melding with it. Minutes stretch into an hour, the field growing warmer under the rising sun. Dust drifts across the grass, blurring distant hills. Then a faint thunder reaches your ears. Not artillery, but hooves, the unmistakable roll of horseflesh galloping. You glance left. A cavalry unit appears, gleaming banners, rippling lances poised like spears of light. Their charge will decide whether your shield wall bends or shatters. Yet before the clash, there's a strange pause. A lone lancer bearing a white pennon gallops forward from the enemy's flank. He raises his visor in salute, a gesture of parley. Across both armies, spearmen steady themselves, cavalry reins relax for the moment. You grip your shield tight, the leather pressing into your palm, and wonder if this knight's honor outweighs his lance's fury. A debated scholarly point. Did chivalric codes truly temper battlefield savagery? Or were they performative acts masking brutal intent? Parley flags signified temporary truces, time to negotiate ransom or terms. Yet some knights abused them for surprise attacks. As the white pennon flutters close, you taste both hope and suspicion in the air, a tension as sharp as drawn steel. Your sergeant signals patience. The enemy knight rides abreast, voice raised in Latin, "Lay down arms and we will negotiate leave for the wounded." His words echo faintly across the grass like a distant bell. Around you, gruff whispers ripple mercy deception. The decision to accept or refuse could save lives or seal fates. Tonight's reflective question emerges as you stand braced in the field. When warriors extend a hand under a banner of truce, do we trust honor or fear? Betrayal? Do gestures of civility amid war illuminate our better nature or reveal the greatest risks? Scholars still debate whether parley flourished in Crusader warfare or served chiefly as tactical ruse. As the white pennon dips toward your lines, let that question linger, like morning's first light, an uncertain promise before the storm of hooves and steel. You awake before dawn once more, the low neighing of horses stirring you from restless dreams. Beyond the line of tents, mounts shift. In their makeshift stalls, knotted ropes around slender legs and hay-stuffed mangers clattering as steeds stretch stiff muscles. You step lightly across frost-kissed ground, the air crisp enough to catch your breath in puffs of white. Today, it's not only your body that must endure hardship, but those loyal animals whose strength carries you across thousand-mile campaigns. A well-established fact during Crusader campaigns, horses were as vital as any knight's sword. Knights traveled on destriers, powerful war horses bred for battle, while baggage train relied on smaller pack horses and mules. Care for these beasts consumed hours each day, feeding, watering, grooming, and tending injuries. Without healthy mounts, a noble's mobility and status could vanish overnight, leaving him vulnerable to both enemy and environment. You approach a row of tired destriers, their flanks ribbed with fatigue and coats matted with mud. A stable hand stands beside you, holding a wooden bucket of coarse oats mixed with barley. He offers you the ladle and nods. It's your turn to feed your mount. You dip in and toss handfuls into the stall, watching your horse, its ears flicking, enormous eyes gleaming, munch eagerly, nostrils flaring with warm breath. The sound of crunching oats is a gentle melody amid the murmur of waking camp. Yet even this task carries challenges. Water sources are scarce and often tainted. A nearby stream crossed by your column yesterday churned with silt and livestock runoff. You lead your horse to its banks, cupping your hands to ladle tepid water for both of you. The horse drinks greedily, its muzzle trembling with relief. You taste a drop yourself, earthy thick, and wonder how beasts and men alike survive such grit. A quirky detail: some crusader grooms mixed crushed wild mint and rosemary into the beast's feed whenever they suspected waterborne illnesses. These herbs, prized for antiseptic properties, might have eased stomach upsets or repelled flies. Archaeological digs uncovered fragments of mint leaves in stable refuse pits, hinting that at least a few stable masters considered botanical remedies as vital as horseshoes. After feeding you, lift your mount's foreleg, inspecting the hoof's edge for stones or cracks. A tiny pebble lodged near the frog. A vulnerable triangular pad could cause a painful bruise. With a hoof pick fashioned from bent iron, you scrape away grit, releasing a squelch of muddy water. The horse stamps tense, but remains still under your practiced hands. You slick its mane with palm oil, untangling brittle strands, feeling the warmth seep into your fingertips. Beyond routine grooming, horses suffered wounds both seen and unseen. Yesterday's skirmish left your destrier with a shallow slash above its fetlock. A groom has already washed the cut with vinegar and sewn it closed using linen thread. You gently press around the wound's edges, noting pink flesh healing beneath the scab. It's a reminder that these mighty creatures bred for strength are as susceptible to pain and infection as any human soldier. Midday brings the farrier, a grizzled man with soot-blackened hands, who arrives with his hammer and nails. He resets a loose horseshoe, bending iron plates to better fit the hoof's sole. Each nail you drive feels like planting trust in the horse's stride, binding metal to flesh to carry both weight and fate. The rhythmic tap of hammer on iron echoes like a heartbeat, steadying your thoughts as sweat beads on your brow. A commonly cited point: well-shod horses could travel twice the distance of neglected mounts, sustaining speeds of 15 to 20 miles per day. Conversely, brittle shoes and cracked hooves forced columns to slow to a painful crawl, sometimes grinding progress to a standstill. You glance at distant hills, calculating how many more miles remain before camp. Your mount's ears flick toward the horizon as if sensing the road ahead. As evening falls, you lead your steed toward a wooden rack where straw awaits. You tighten the girth and drape a rough wool blanket over its flanks, warding off nighttime chills. Frost hovers on the grass, and you can almost see your horse's breath swirl around lowered head. A stable boy leans close, humming a plaintive ditty, taught by his grandmother, a lullaby meant to calm restless steeds and ease them into slumber. A debated scholarly question lingers: did Crusader commanders understand the importance of equine rest cycles? Or did they push horses beyond endurance in pursuit of military objectives? Some contemporary letters criticize lords who forced dawn to dusk marches without proper respite, while others argue that urgency outweighed caution in campaigns against well-fortified foes. You stroke your horse's neck, pondering whether you've struck the right balance between haste and care. Beyond physical needs, horses bore the emotional burden of battle. Stories tell of destriers refusing to rise after their riders fell as though mourning loss. One famed war horse, named Noir Chroniclers, say plunged into enemy lines, seeking its wounded master, an act of loyalty so fierce that writers penned ballads in its honor. You whisper soothing words to your own mount, feeling gratitude for its steadfast companionship amid dust and steel. Tonight's reflective question surfaces as you settle beside the stall when we rely on others, man or beast, to carry us through trials. Where does our responsibility begin and end? Do we honor their sacrifice by tending wounds and offering rest? Or do we demand more than they can give in the name of victory? Scholars still debate whether medieval armies truly cherished their horses or regarded them as expendable tools of war. You pat your horse's flank one final time before stepping back into camp's glow. The lanterns cast dancing shadows on straw and wood, and your heartbeat slows to match the measured breathing of your destrier. As you drift toward sleep beneath the canvas skies, let the quiet loyalty of your mount remind you that shared burdens, be they armor, oats, or hope, bind us across the hardships of any journey. You wake to the muted clink of merchants and camp quartermasters fumbling with coin pouches and scales beneath a pale dawn sky. The air smells of dust, leather, and the metallic tang of silver. Your fingers brush against the small pouch tied to your belt's leather thong, a handful of silver deniers and obols that could vanish with one careless moment or one greedy hand. Today, you'll confront the invisible currents of commerce and the ever-present shadow of highwaymen. A well-established fact, Crusader armies operated on thin financial margins. They funded their expeditions through church tithes, personal fortunes, and pledges of support. Yet gold and silver were scarce on the march. Armies resorted to barter, accepting grain, livestock, or even labor as payment. Horn cups carved from ox bone or lengths of dyed wool circulated as currency when precious metals ran dry. You tighten your cloak against the dawn chill and approach the makeshift market near the command tent. Stalls fashioned from canvas and wooden poles display wares, salted cheese, piled in waxed cloth sacks of millet and barley, and jars of olive oil glinting like amber. A boisterous tanner offers leather strips in exchange for 2 copper pfennigs. Across the way, a barber surgeon trades razor blades and drinking horns for a single silver denier, a steep price that speaks to the desperation of specialized craftspeople on campaign. A curious detail, some merchants minted emergency camp tokens, small bronze discs stamped with the Lord's seal to facilitate trade within the army. You hold one between thumb and forefinger, its edge worn smooth. The token's value, recognized by camp officials, buys you a mug of thin brew or a handful of dried figs. Yet beyond tent lines, these tokens hold no worth, forcing you to trade them back for metal coins or perishables before exiting the market. You thread through murmured haggling, spotting soldiers, comparing exchange rates scribbled on leather strips: 1 denier, 2 obols of bacon, 1 silver grow, 3 jars of mead. Prices fluctuate with scarcity. If a wagon breaks down or a mule falters, grain becomes rare, and its cost skyrockets. You consider trading a fine linen scarf, an item you'd hope to gift your squire, for a jug of honeyed mead, its sweet warmth more precious than any cloth on this arduous campaign. Yet commerce on the road is perilous. A lesser-known truth, banditry thrived in the wake of marching columns. Desperate peasants and seasoned raiders alike preyed on stragglers and supply wagons. You glance at the narrow road winding through olive groves just beyond camp. 2 knights stand guard atop a small hillock, lances laid across their saddles, scanning for movement. Their presence deters common thieves, but large-scale ambushes require cavalry patrols, and even those can be deceived by false flags and hidden stockades. Your boots crunch on gravel as you step toward the Army's treasury tent, an unassuming canvas booth guarded by armored sergeants. Inside, chests of tarnished coins rest on trestle tables. You present a requisition for funds to purchase bridge repairs essential to cross a swollen river in 2 days. The treasurer, a stern-faced clerk with ink-stained fingers, weighs your request against dwindling reserves. He tallies deniers and obols on parchment letters in the margins marking past expenditures. His ledger's faded ink hints at countless entries balancing survival and strategy. Denied gold, you turn to local trade. A ragged merchant awaits outside his donkey, laden with earthenware jugs of goat's milk and cheese. He demands 2 deniers for a jug, citing dangerous passes ahead. You assess his weather-beaten face and the dust on his robes. Bandits often masqueraded as traders. One wrong deal could cost you coin, or worse. You haggle, offering 1 denier and half a dried fig. He laughs a low rasp, born of too many deals, and shakes his head. Only 1.5 deniers he counters. You surrender a denier and tuck a melon-sized fig into the straw padding around the jugs, sealing your uncertain bargain. As you shoulder the jugs, the road ahead narrows into a sun-scorched ravine. Olive trees thin out, replaced by jagged rocks where thieves might wait in ambush. Your senses sharpen. You run a hand along your sword scabbard and check the pouch at your belt's clasp. The deniers and obols rest heavier, now symbols of both necessity and vulnerability. Lightning cracks overhead, an aberration, where the sky is clear. The distant echo startles you. You peer up. Vultures circle a rocky outcrop above the ravine's entrance. Riding instinct, you loosen your grip on the jugs and draw your sword one-handed, keeping them at waist level. Behind you, the column's wagons creak nearer. Ahead, the vulture's dance suggests a carcass or charnel. Bandits often used animal remains as trapped soldiers who pause to investigate risked isolation. You proceed with caution, footsteps soft on dusty stone. At the ravine's mouth, 2 battered wooden bridges span narrow chasms carved by seasonal torrents. The planks creak under your weight as you cross one at a time. Halfway across, shouts rise behind you. Your escort sergeant and 2 archers emerge from cover boughs drawn. Bandits. You grip your sword and glance back. Your sergeant signals all clear, pointing to a shepherd boy stepping from an olive grove, arms raised in peace. Relief floods you as you realize the vultures were drawn by a dead goat lodged on a rock shelf, not a fallen comrade. Beyond the ravine, more trade awaits. A field of lean sheep tethered to stakes. A shepherd offers wool for 1 obol per fleece. You survey your sash's fold, spending even 1 obol might leave you penniless later. Yet the softness of fresh fleece mended into a neck warmer could stave off nighttime chills that bite deeper than sword wounds. You trade a single obol for a handful of wool, winding it around your neck like both scarf and shield against cold doubt. Tonight's reflection surfaces as you shoulder the sheep's fleece and continue down the road when currency is scarce and risks run high. Do we prioritize immediate comfort or long-term security? Would you part with precious coin to ease a moment's hardship, or cling to every denier as your only safeguard against future need? And when commerce and caution collide, which guides your hand, calculated prudence or a desperate hope for relief? As twilight drapes the sky and muted grays lanterns flicker along the road, guiding your steps. Let the memory of goats, milk, cheese, wool, and hard-won coin accompany you into dreams where every small exchange shapes the course of journeys great and small. You wake to the muted clink of merchants and camp quartermasters fumbling with coin pouches and scales beneath a pale dawn sky. The air smells of dust, leather, and the metallic tang of silver. Your fingers brush against the small pouch tied to your belt's leather thong, a handful of deniers and obols that could vanish in a careless moment or at the reach of one greedy hand. Today, you'll confront not steel or disease, but the tangled web of words and whispers that shape alliances and betrayals, a well-established fact. Crusader armies were a mosaic of contingents from across Europe, Normans, Provençals, Germans, and others, each speaking its own dialect. Orders given in one tongue often mutated into confusion by the time they reached common infantry, fueling delays and missteps on the march. You feel the weight of that truth as your squire struggles to relay a message delivered in guttural Flemish. You swing into the saddle leather, creaking beneath your weight, and head toward the pavilion of the High Command, where banners flutter atop poles in the morning breeze. The earth beneath you smells of damp straw and stirring horses. A trumpet's muted call signals a council of war where lords and clergy will debate the next objective. Your role is to translate every misrendered word here can spell disaster. A curious detail: Crusader armies sometimes carried messenger pigs, trained boars outfitted with leather pouches tied to their flanks, used to deliver brief messages across short distances when riders were unavailable. Archaeological digs near Acre uncovered small iron rings likely used to tether such swine. The pig's stubbornness often delayed correspondence, a fitting symbol for communication itself. Unpredictable, easily spooked, and a little bit clever. You enter the pavilion, the scent of incense lingering from last night's vigil, blending with the sharp aroma of tallow candles. Seated around a rough-hewn oak table, barons lean over maps drawn on parchment, their faces lit by flickering flame. A monk, versed in Latin and Old French, recites updates from the Eastern Front. Each phrase glides forth in solemn Latin, then ripples through dialects as aides whisper in each other's ears. You note the subtle shift. Advance at dawn becomes hold position, then prepare camp. Tonight's dispositions may hinge on your next interpretation. Beside you, a Provençal knight whispers in Occitan that he fears mistranslation. You pass his concern to the monk, who sighs an exhalation that billows his hood like smoke. His French translation loses the urgency of the original, rendering a plea for caution as mere suggestion. You meet the knight's narrowed gaze and wonder which is more dangerous, a lost battle or a broken promise. Outside, horse hooves clatter and armor rattles. You catch a breath of crushed lavender from a pouch at your hip, a calming herb your mother sent you for sleepless nights. Medieval scribes chewed lavender to steady their tongues. You tuck a dried bud between your teeth, its gentle bitterness soothing the knot in your stomach. Returning inside, you render the monk's French into clear English. The enemy fortifies the hill to our east. Reinforcements arrive at midday. Await them before the assault. The Norman marshal frowns, tapping his gauntleted finger on the map. No, he growls in Norman French, we strike at first light. The monk hesitates, caught between tongues and loyalties. You step forward, voice low but firm, marshal. The orders are to wait for reinforcements. His eyes flick to yours, a silent test of your authority. Beyond the pavilion, you ride to the camp's edge, where envoys from Frankish and Greek contingents wait beneath a banner bearing both cross and double-headed eagle. Their greetings blend Byzantine Greek and broken French in musical dissonance. You dismount and offer a respectful bow. One envoy returns it in graceful Greek Erini peace. You reply in French pace, hoping your single word can stand for volumes of intent. A lesser-known anecdote, one Crusader account, tells of a knight so desperate that, lacking a common language, he drew crude stick figure maps to negotiate passage through hostile territory. Though inelegant, those pictograms conveyed urgency where words failed. You tuck that thought away as horns call the army to arms. You lead foot soldiers toward the eastern slopes, relaying orders in English, then French, then broken Arabic for local allies. Each translation slows the march by heartbeats, yet clarity outweighs haste. As battle cries rise, you stand at the front whispering commands into each lieutenant's ear. Hold the line, shift left, protect the flanks. Your words cut through the din like ripples across water, carrying hope and order into chaos. Tonight's reflective question drifts through your mind as camp settles under moonlight in a world torn by swords. Could the subtle art of translation wield as much power as the sharpest blade? When every word shapes lives and fortunes, is linguistic mastery the truest weapon of war. You crest a low rise just as the sun peaks over distant hills, its light uncovering a ruined city sprawled before you. Once proud walls now lie shattered stone blocks, tumbled into heaps, their mortar reduced to dust by catapult's fury. Here and there, broken towers lean at impossible angles, as if frozen mid-collapse. Through fissures in collapsed roofs, weeds sprout defiantly, their green shoots brushing the battlement's crumbling edges. The air carries the acrid scent of smoldering timber, mingled with damp earth. A well-documented fact, countless towns and fortifications in the Levant suffered ruinous sieges during the Crusades. Weapons of war rolling siege engines, flaming pots, and battering rams reduced walls to rubble, leaving civilian homes and granaries equally devastated. Chroniclers estimate that some cities changed hands as many as 5 times each conquest, inflicting fresh damage and straining supply lines beyond repair. You steer your destrier through a narrow breach in the outer wall, guiding him over scattered rubble and the skeletal remains of wooden scaffolding once used to mount scaling ladders. Beneath your feet, you hear the crunch of broken tiles and discarded arrowheads tangled in rotting vines. A line of pack mules worn and weary files behind each, burdened with half-empty grain sacks and cracked water skins. The sight of these battered animals, their coats dulled by dust, underscores the kingdom's logistics at breaking point. A curious detail: after one particularly brutal siege, Crusader engineers repurposed parts of the ruined walls. Themselves, large blocks pried from collapsed sections became makeshift stepping stones across muddy trenches or crude barricades in new encampments. 19th century excavators at Caesarea Maritima cataloged dozens of medieval chisel marks on stones, matching earlier fortifications, revealing this resourceful recycling of enemy strongholds. You brush a hand across a stone's pitted face, tracing the grooves where builders twisted iron levers to lift heavy slabs. Amid the devastation, you glimpse the human toll. A handful of townsfolk, gaunt and wide-eyed, emerge from cellar doorways half buried in silt. Their clothes hang in tatters, and their eyes betray a hunger and fear no battle cry can soothe. Children cling to frail mothers, their tiny hands smeared with dust and tears. A woman scrapes at mud-caked pottery shards, searching for remnants of grain worth eating. You offer half a loaf of hardtack from your satchel. Her gratitude flickers like a fragile candle flame in the darkness of despair. Beyond the city gates, the supply train grinds to a halt at a collapsed bridge spanning the dry riverbed. Massive timbers lie snapped and charred, a makeshift crossing replaced by a steep bank that sends pack animals into deep ruts. Engineers and laborers clad in chain shirts and leather jerkins argue over the best way to repair it. Some propose erecting a pontoon bridge using barrels lashed together. Others insist on foraging local timber, risking ambush along the forested banks. Each option carries hidden costs. Barrels, slow transport, while wood demands time and manpower neither the army nor local peasants can spare. A frequently cited debate: did Crusader armies err by overstretching supply lines to besiege city after city? Or were these logistical crises inevitable in hostile terrain? Modern historians argue that too few trained engineers and too little local cooperation turned minor repairs into crippling setbacks. Yet some contend that no amount of planning could overcome the harsh realities of war droughts, rogue militias, and shifting alliances made every supply route a gamble. You press onward into the city's central square, once a place of market stalls and public proclamations, now a graveyard of splintered carts and overturned barrels. With each step, your boots crunch on broken glass and scattered coins, their faded silver glinting in the morning sun. Among the wreckage, you spot a tattered banner bearing the emblem of a Muslim emir half buried in dust. A stark reminder that this siege shattered more than walls. It shattered lives on both sides. A lesser-known anecdote: after capturing a major fortress, some Crusader commanders hosted mock tournaments within its shattered courtyards, staging jousts and melees to boost morale. Chroniclers note armored horses struck by flying debris, sometimes galloped blindly into ruined towers, collapsing masonry anew. The carnage, mixed with feasting and revelry, struck civilians as both cruel and absurd, a stark contrast to the solemn vows sworn before battle. Your column halts at a ruined chapel, whose roof has collapsed inward beams, fallen in a crisscross like broken ribs. Inside, the carved stone altar remains surprisingly intact, dusted with ash and fallen plaster. A wandering minstrel among the camp's followers plays a soft dirge on a bowed lyre, its mournful notes reverberating through the chapel's open walls. The music, tinged with sorrow, seeps into your bones, reminding you that every fallen stone carries stories of faith, hope, and loss. Even amid ruin, the work of rebuilding begins. Laborers erect temporary shelters using torn banners and tent canvas, creating spaces where survivors can rest. Engineers sketch plans on rolled parchment, mapping out new walls laid atop old foundations. You observe a team marking out a fresh trench with wooden stakes, their lines imperfect but hopeful proof that even in devastation, human resilience sparks renewal. Tonight's reflective question drifts through your thoughts in the aftermath of siege and ruin. Do the resources spent on rebuilding signify victory or merely postpone the next collapse? When walls fall and bridges break, does the effort to restore order unite communities or deepen divides between victors and the vanquished? Scholars still debate whether Crusader successes rested on architectural mastery or on the capacity to endure and rebuild time and again. You stand outside the chapel's shattered archway, the ruins bathed in the orange glow of torchlight as campfires flicker among the stones. In the hush, before night fully settles, let the echo of that question linger like distant thunder. Can the ashes of destruction become the seedbed for lasting peace, or will they forever beckon new storms of steel and flame? You wake to a thin drizzle pattering against your canvas tent, each drop a tap, tap, tap on the taut fabric that feels oddly soothing. The damp air carries the scent of wet leather and pine needles, mingling with the faint metallic tang of your armor. Around you, the low murmur of half-asleep soldiers drifts through the camp hushed voices, exchanging worries and small comforts before dawn's chill fully bites. A well-known fact, soldiers in Crusader armies endured chronic homesickness and anxiety. Far from familiar fields and hearth fires, many clung to memories of family and morning routines left behind. Letters carried by traveling monks sometimes arrived weeks, if not months, after departure, fueling uncertainty about home safety and the well-being of loved ones. You feel that ache twisting in your chest as you pull on your damp boots and adjust the straps of your sword belt. Beneath the weight of steel and cloth lies a fragile psyche. You step from your tent into a shallow trench carved for drainage water, sloshing around your ankles. Each footstep splashes with a soft psht that echoes like whispered secrets. You press your fingertips to your forehead, tasting the salt of your own sweat. The pattering rain, oppressive at first, now becomes a gentle percussion, an ASMR lullaby that steadies a mind stretched thin. A curious detail, some nights carried personal tokens, scraps of cloth from home cloaks, carved wooden rosaries or pebbles, smoothed by childhood streams tucking them beneath their armor. In the quiet before battle, they would retrieve these objects, closing their eyes to feel the texture and recall simpler days. Archaeologists have found small pouches of hair beneath chain mail and burial sites, unmistakable proof that even hardened warriors sought solace in intimate keepsakes. You join the morning muster, the steady drip of rain from helmets forming a soft background rhythm. Your sergeant reads roll call. Each name is answered by a weary "here." You watch for missed names, comrades who vanished overnight to illness, desertion, or worse. Each absence sends a chill deeper than the damp morning air. Your heart thumps with the knowledge that every day could be your last in this foreign land. Beyond the tangible losses lie deeper wounds, fear and suspicion. In tight quarters, prudence can morph into paranoia. You catch furtive glances, a man checking another's belt for hidden coins, whispers of suspected spies among local guides. Trust phrases, hardship binds men together. Each shared tent becomes a crucible where loyalty and doubt intermingle like water and oil. A scholarly debate simmers. Did the mental strain of Crusader life strengthen bonds of brotherhood, or did it cultivate fractures of mistrust that later erupted in violence? Some historians argue that shared trauma forged camaraderie more enduring than circumstance. Others note records of fratricide, theft, and mutiny suggest anxiety frequently overwhelmed unity. Pacing a sodden circle near a flickering torch, you draw a deep breath of damp earth and pine. You press your palms against a rough wooden post, feeling grooves worn by countless soldiers seeking steadiness before combat. The wood's grain soothes calloused skin, reminding you that solid ground can anchor a turbulent mind if only for a moment. A lesser-known anecdote surfaces when anxiety soared. Some crusaders bit strips of willow bark, an ancient analgesic believed to calm nerves. Modern analysis reveals willow's salicin compound, a natural forerunner of aspirin, may indeed have offered mild relief. You imagine chewing the bitter strips, the tang of bark coating your tongue as a small measure of calm settles over you. Rain lightens to mist as the captain issues orders for the day's march. You sling your pack over your shoulder, leather damp but supple, and begin the slow trudge toward the river ford. The path is slick. Roots and rocks lie concealed beneath a muddy film. Each careful step demands focus, a temporary reprieve from the swirl of worries about home battle and survival. The river's roar grows louder, a comforting white noise promising refreshment and a moment's respite. Reaching the bank, you pause to dunk your face in the cool current droplets, the splashing in gentle arcs. The water carries the forest's scent and a hint of wild mint from upstream. You cup more to your lips, letting its crisp clarity wash away the lingering taste of fear. Suggestion: you might consider varying sentence length even more, perhaps combining a few shorter sentences into a complex sentence for rhythm. You settle into your post atop the fortress wall just as dawn's pale light seeps into a sky still heavy with night's hush. Around you, the steady rhythm of sentries pacing along the battlements forms a quiet chorus, boots tapping stone armor, softly clinking, and vigilant eyes scanning the horizon. In this silent vigil, your senses sharpen the distant crow of a rooster, the soft rustle of wind through the merlons, and the faint aroma of dew-laden moss clinging to the ancient stones. A well-established fact, medieval fortresses relied on rotating guard schedules to maintain constant surveillance. Sentries stood for hours on end trading shifts only when exhaustion threatened their alertness. Chronicles of the Third Crusade note that some castles enforced watches as long as 6 hours, punctuated by horn calls to signal relief. You lift your helm's visor and sip from a water skin, the cool liquid coursing down your throat. It will have to sustain you until the next change of guard. Boredom, however, can be as perilous as enemy arrows. To stay vigilant, you follow a practiced routine, scan the west gate for any stirrings of movement, then shift your gaze to the tree line where scouts might slip beneath shadows. A quirky detail emerges. Some guards carried small flint stones and struck them together, creating gentle sparks at intervals to ward off creeping fatigue. Excavations at Crac des Chevaliers unearthed flint shards near guard posts, suggesting this simple tactic helped some sentries remain half awake through long watches. As you pace the narrow walkway, your thoughts wander to the fortress's ancient inscriptions, faded carvings praising past rulers and beseeching divine protection. You pause to press your palm against the cool stone, imagining the hands that once did the same centuries ago. The wall's rough texture imprints tiny grains of sand beneath your fingertips, a tactile reminder that walls carry memories of both triumph and siege. Mid-morning brings the clang of steel. A fellow soldier adjusts the heavy portcullis mechanism, its massive iron teeth rising with a groan. Below, the moat water laps against wooden stakes, its gentle murmur offering a counterpoint to the soldier's measured steps. Occasionally, A sparrow flits across your path, perching for a moment on the crenellation before darting away. You watch its quick movements, envying its freedom, even as you appreciate the bird's uncanny ability to spot approaching riders long before human eyes. A commonly cited point, certain fortifications employed watcher owls, tamed birds, released nightly to alert guards to unseen threats. While evidence is scant, a few manuscript illuminations depict hooded figures holding owls by their jesses, suggesting at least some defenders experimented with avian reconnaissance. You glance into the dusk-lit battlements, half expecting to see soft wings against the sky. Hours pass with little more than the shifting light and your steady breath for company. You tuck your sword within easy reach, not for battle, but as a talisman against creeping dread. Silence stacked hour upon hour can twist thoughts into echo chambers where fear and frustration breed. To combat restlessness, you recite quietly lines from psalms learned at dawn's chapel vigil, finding rhythm and solace in sacred verse. Beyond the wall's edge, you glimpse a group of engineers laying plans for an extension of the curtain wall. They lean over a rough sketch carved into slate-marking mortar lines and buttress placements. Their presence reminds you that vigilance comes in many forms, the patient art of building defenses as much as the instant readiness to repel attack. Stone mortar and labor transform idle waiting into purposeful creation. A nuanced, scholarly debate centers on such labor. Did reinforcing walls during lulls distract from more dynamic military campaigns? Or did it offer long-term security that saved entire regions from devastating raids? Some historians praise the foresight of commanders who invested in fortifications. Others argue that resources sunk into walls might have better served field armies pressing deeper into enemy territory. You study the engineers' careful measurements, wondering which strategy history will deem superior. As afternoon sun tilts westward, a messenger's horn sounds from the courtyard below, its single note echoing against the battlements. The relief guard approaches him tucked under arm chain mail, muted under plain surcoat. You exchange a terse nod, sliding your water pouch and curved dagger across the parapet. In return, you receive a flask of wine and a handful of crusty bread, a small comfort earned by steadiness. You descend the narrow stair to stretch cramped limbs and drink deeply of wine's tart sweetness. With each sip, warmth spreads through your veins, easing the tension gathered in shoulders hunched against watchful strain. Below, laughter drifts from the cook's tent, where simple stew simmers over embers. The scent of onions and roasted chicken wafts upward, teasing your hunger earned through hours of vigilance. Yet, even these comforts bear a price. Every moment spent eating, every second spent stretching, pulls you farther from watchful readiness. You gobble the bread swiftly, mindful of the toll fatigue can take on alertness. As you return to the wall, the wind carries a distant horn's bray, and all clear that signals nothing, yet alerts every sentinel's ears. Night falls in layers of deep indigo, and torches ignite along the battlements, their golden glow painting flickering patterns on stone. The courtyard below hums with activity. Archers string arrows, and a lone minstrel's lute plays a soft lullaby meant to soothe the camp before midnight prayers. You lean on your spear, sensing the weight of every guarded hour as a thread binding past and future. Tonight's reflective question emerges through the wall's quiet vigil when patience itself becomes a weapon shaping defenses, sustaining morale, and guarding against unseen threats. Do we honor endurance as much as courage? And does the art of waiting, practiced in silent footsteps and watchful eyes, reveal a deeper form of strength than any single sword? Thrust scholars still debate whether fortitude in stillness proved as decisive as valor in battle. You stand beneath torchlight, the wall's stones warm beneath your feet, and let that question settle into your bones like the mortar binding this fortress together. In the long hours between dawn and dusk, remember that waiting too is a craft, and that every dawn you greet and every night you endure writes another silent stanza in history's unending watch. You emerge onto the deck of a creaking galley just before sunrise, its oaken planks slick with brine and the footprints of sailors racing to their stations. A salt-heavy breeze rolls off the sea, carrying the tang of fish tar and the distant promise of new shores. Below-deck rowers chant in unison, their oars dipping into glassy water in rhythmic arcs that propel the vessel forward. You steady yourself against a stout railwood worn smooth by countless voyages, and let the sway of ship and song synchronize your breath. A well-documented fact, Crusader armies depended heavily on maritime transport to move troops, horses, and supplies between coastal strongholds and allied ports. Galleys, long vessels powered by oarsmen and supplemented by square sails, were the workhorses of medieval navies. Contemporary logs note that a single galley could carry up to 50 fighting men plus crew, but required nearly 100 rowers to maintain speed against wind and current. You hear the chant of heave-ho echoing below, reminding you that every stroke binds you to the ship's motley company. Yet, life at sea carried hazards as fierce as any battlefield. You inhale the sharp scent of pitch used to seal seams, only to taste it on your tongue when sea spray breaks over the bow. The constant motion makes each step a small victory against nausea. A quirky detail, some crusaders carried small pouches of dried ginger or peppermint leaves to chew when the waves churned their stomachs. Archaeological finds at Sidon uncovered leather sachets stained green, suggesting these early anti-nauseants saw frequent use. You fish a leaf from your pocket and let its cool aroma steady your senses. Above the ship's captain, a weathered mariner with a sun-scorched face shouts orders in clipped Catalan, directing helmsmen to trim the sail for a favorable tack. Flags snap overhead, emblazoned with crosses and fleur-de-lis, signaling both religious devotion and regional pride. You admire how the bright banners flutter against the pale horizon, a visual bond among warriors from diverse lands. Yet, under these pennants, tempers can fray as wildly as sails in a gale. Mid-morning brings a sudden shift. Clouds gather on the horizon, and the galley's head begins to pitch more sharply. Sailors rush to reef the canvas hauling ropes that burn raw palms and send spray across their sweat-slicked backs. You grip the rail boots sliding on wet planks and watch the oarsmen strain against the swell. The sea's surface ripples into towering swells that rock the vessel, each roll a silent test of balance and will. A commonly cited point, storms at sea claimed more crusader lives than enemy combat. Medieval captains lacked accurate charts and weather forecasting, relying on coastal landmarks and instinct to navigate. One ill-fated voyage off Cyprus in 1191 saw dozens of galleys wrecked on hidden shoals, drowning hundreds of men and spoiling vital supplies. You scan the gray water for signs of hidden rocks, trusting both your eyes and the prayers you whispered at dawn. As the wind spikes, you descend to the sheltered hold to check on supplies. Barrels of salted meat and dried grains line the narrow corridor, bundled against moisture. You roll one barrel carefully into place, noting a musty tang that hints at seepage. Even in calm seas, these stores teeter between sustenance and spoilage. A briny drip from above reminds you that leaks spell disaster when fresh water is already rationed to scant cups per man each day. A surprising anecdote surfaces: some crews carried live pigs below deck, not merely as food, but as early damage control against hold breaches. In an emergency, pigs were driven through holes in the hull to plug leaks, their bristly backs and twitching bodies pressed against planks to slow water ingress until proper repairs could be made. You imagine the horror of being below decks when swine charged past, yet concede that creative problem-solving often blends necessity with chaos. Above deck, the storm breaks. Sheets of rain slash across your face, soaking helm and chainmail in seconds. The chant of rowers falters as thunder rumbles offshore. You man the helm alongside a burly sailor, both hands gripping the wheel spokes. Water cascades over the rail in foaming gusts, turning decks slick as glass. Salt stings your eyes, forcing you to peer through blurred lashes as you steer the galley into the brunt of the waves, angling the bow to ride the peaks rather than plunging into troughs. A modern debate arises: did medieval mariners understand basic seamanship well enough to avoid sudden squalls, or did overconfidence in divine favor lead to needless shipwrecks? Some logs describe captains ignoring colored clouds and erratic bird flight patterns, ancient signs of storms to adhere rigidly to schedules. Others praise the intuitive skills of local pilots who read the sea like a book. You feel that tension as every wave's crest looms overhead, each drop a potential deluge that could swamp the oarports. Lightning forks across the sky, illuminating the deck in stark white. Screams rise as rigging snaps and a mast cracks under pressure. You shout alongside the crew, hauling ropes and lunging to secure a torn sail. The masts fracture, splinters wood around you. A jagged shard grazes your arm, carving a shallow gash that trickles blood into the swirling water at your feet. Pain flares sharp as hail against your skin, but adrenaline numbs the worst. Below, the oarsman's chant falters into grunts of exertion. You descend to steady the gangplank and check on a collapsed rower, his face pale as sea foam. You press a handkerchief to his brow, urging him to breathe steadily as you bark for more water. His nod is weak but determined, another testament to the resolve that surges when sacred causes meet the sea's fury. After what feels like an eternity, the storm's edge passes. The galley lists less sharply, and the rain falls into soft mist. You climb back to deck, dripping and exhausted, to behold a calm sea that shimmers like polished steel. Above, the clouds break into pale blue, and a subdued sun glows through scattered veils. Crew and soldiers alike press hands to the railing, tasting briny air that now feels almost gentle. Tonight's reflective question emerges as you peer toward the star-spangled sky. When faith drives men across treacherous waters, do we overestimate divine protection, or does belief itself sharpen our instincts and fortify our courage? Scholars still debate whether medieval seafarers relied excessively on prayer, or whether their unity and skill underpinned their survival. As the galley slides through glassy waves toward distant shores, let that question guide your thoughts. Like the North Star, an unwavering point amid shifting tides. You wake before dawn to the rumble of cartwheels on packed earth, the low clatter mingling with the soft sigh of wind through olive branches. Ahead lies the valley floor turned farmland fields of ripening wheat, swaying like golden waves beneath a sky streaked with pale rose. Today, you'll oversee the construction of an aqueduct to carry water from distant springs to the camp's crop terraces, transforming arid soil into bounty. A well-established fact, medieval engineers in Crusader territories built extensive waterworks, canals, cisterns, and aqueducts to support armies and colonies in drought-prone regions. These structures borrowed techniques from Roman predecessors and local Levantine artisans channeling mountain streams through masonry arches and lined trenches. You inhale the earthy scent of damp stone and fresh clay mortar as workers haul carved blocks into place. Stepping onto the worksite, you feel the cool morning damp beneath your boots. Stones lie arranged in neat stacks, their surfaces dusted with lime. An engineer in stained robes consults a wooden stave marked with notches, measuring gradient with practiced precision. You pause to trace a finger across a freshly chiseled mark, an alignment guide so straight it gleams under the dawn light. The engineer nods at your interest and explains that a mere half-inch of slope per yard ensures steady flow without erosion. A curious detail, some aqueduct builders added small niches along the conduit's walls to house holy icons or oil lamps. These sanctuary recesses not only protected masonry joints from water stress, but also offered pilgrims a place to pause and pray for safe passage. Archaeological surveys near Acre uncovered faded remnants of painted crosses within such niches, hinting at the fusion of faith and engineering. You imagine oil's warm glow flickering before dawn, guiding water and worshipers alike. You join a team mixing mortar-hefting buckets of water from a nearby spring that murmurs through reed beds. The mixture's cool splash against your forearms carries a mineral tang that lingers on your skin. You scoop a dollop onto a trowel and press it between two squared stones, the paste oozing just enough to seal the seam. Beneath your palms, the mortar's grainy texture vibrates with potential solidifying the conduit that will nourish fields and fortify defenses. Workers chant soft refrains. As they align stones, their voices a low echo that reverberates through the half-built arches. The chorus rises and falls like ripples in the channel, sinking their efforts and keeping fatigue at bay. A master mason taps a rod against a block, listening for a hollow tone that signals a perfect fit. When it rings like a bell, he claps a gloved hand and gestures to set the stone. You join the rhythm, each tap a small triumph that edges the aqueduct closer to completion. But even the best laid plans encounter challenges. The valley's soil reveals veins of clay that swell when wet, threatening to shift foundations. Engineers debate whether to reinforce the base with wooden piles driven deep or to reroute the channel along firmer ground at greater expense. You weigh both options, feeling the cool clay seep through your boots as you kneel to inspect the trench's bottom. Your fingers note subtle crack signs that hurried work could collapse under spring floods. A scholarly debate surfaces, did Crusader builders rely too heavily on Roman texts, neglecting local geological wisdom? Or did they adapt effectively to Levantine conditions by blending traditions? Some historians argue that importing European masons without regional experience led to repeated structural failures. Others point to a successful reservoir still standing today as proof of cross-cultural ingenuity. You watch as a local foreman signals for additional pilings, favoring cautious reinforcement over speed. Midday sun warms the valley, coaxing sweat from your brow and sharpening the scent of lime and stone dust. You pause under an archway to sip cool water from a goatskin flask, its slight tang of tannin offsetting the metallic dryness of labor. Nearby, a Boy Scout dips a reed into the flowing channel, testing the flow's clarity. He taste tests the water and nods before passing the flask to you. Its pure taste hints at springs high in the hills, miles upstream. As the aqueduct takes shape, farmers prepare terraces below, laying stone retaining walls to catch irrigation. They kneel in the fertile earth, turning the dark soil that awaits the channel's first trickle. You crouch beside them, feeling the earth's soft yield against your fingers, smelling its rich loam. Together, you press seeds of barley into the furrows, envisioning golden sheaves swaying in harvest moons. A lesser-known anecdote emerges. When pressure in the conduit grew too high, builders installed small overflow spouts, whisper vents that emitted a gentle hiss rather than gushing water. These vents prevented catastrophic breaches and created a soft, constant murmur admired by camp dwellers as a lullaby through summer nights. You press your ear to one such spout and hear the water's hushed song, a promise of life carried in every drop. As dusk settles, you oversee the final alignment, a keystone placed at the apex of the highest arch. When fitted, the entire structure will lock into a stable whole. You guide the block with ropes and wooden rollers, feeling its weight shift the earth beneath. When it clicks into place, the channel stands ready to convey water at first light. Tonight's reflective question drifts like mist over the valley. When we channel resources across great distances, be they water ideas or faith, does the conduit itself carry deeper meaning, binding cultures and communities? Do we honor the hands that shaped stone, mortar, and masonry mix, or forget them once the water flows free? Scholars still debate whether medieval waterworks were technical marvels or social catalysts that sustained crusader states and local populations alike. You step back from the arch, tasting dust and sweat on your lips, and let the whispered hiss of water in the test channel cradle your thoughts. In the silence of achievement, consider how every engineered bridge between spring and field mirrors the bridges we build with one another, stone by stone, word by whispered word. Suggestion: to enhance immersion, consider adding a brief sensory moment, perhaps the feel of warmed stones on your palm at sunset, or the distant call of waterfowl before closing your vigil. You descend from the aqueduct's lofty arches at dawn, the valley's cool mist curling around your calves like spectral fingers. Ahead, messengers from Frankish, Venetian, and Greek contingents gather beneath fluttering banners, each emblazoned with crosses, lions, and double-headed eagles. Today, you'll navigate the fragile tapestry of alliances that binds these diverse forces together as essential and perilous as any siege engine. A well-established fact, Crusader armies depended on fragile coalitions among Western Knights, Italian maritime republics, and Byzantine forces. Each group brought unique strengths, heavy cavalry, naval support, local intelligence, but also competing interests and deep mistrust. Generals met under white tents to negotiate strategy, yet beneath cordial handshakes, lurked rivalries over spoils and territorial claims. You approach the pavilion where envoys stand in a semicircle, their armor and attire reflecting varied origins. A Norman count in polished mail, a Venetian admiral in silk robes stained by sea spray, and a Byzantine archon in bronze scales, his eyes as sharp as falcon talons. A low hum of greeting ripples through the assembly as you step forward, bearing news of the aqueduct's progress. The admiral lifts a goblet of spring water and nods gravely water. After all sustains both welcoming camps and hard-won treaties, yet alliances fray in unexpected ways. A curious detail emerges. Venetian captains sometimes withheld naval aid unless granted lucrative trading rights in conquered ports, bargaining sea lanes for strategic support. Venetian logs record fleets arriving late or feigning storms to avoid land campaigns that offered little commercial gain. You sense the admiral's hesitation, as if he's weighing the aqueduct's benefit against future port tolls. You present the engineering plans in Latin, then translate them into French for the Count and Greek for the Archon. With the help of your cohort of interpreters, their tongues shifting like dancers between languages. Each phrase carries weight. If the aqueduct succeeds, the camp's granaries will flourish, you say, but only if the road to Ruad remains open for grain convoys. The Archon's frown deepens. Ruad lies off the Syrian coast, and Byzantine squadrons must control those waters for supply lines to hold. A scholarly debate flickers at the edges of your thoughts. Did Crusader success hinge more on martial valor or diplomatic acumen? Some historians argue that battlefield victories crumbled when alliances unraveled. Others credit rapid conquests to skillful negotiation that kept fractious allies aligned. You feel that tension as you watch Venetian and Byzantine envoys exchange guarded glances, each weighing communal good against national self-interest. Mid-morning sun warms the valley floor, and the alliance meeting moves into the open air. A standard bearer secures a crimson canopy between two olive trees, offering scant shade. Beneath it, you watch a Venetian merchant unfurl a parchment detailing proposed trade privileges, toll-free access to acres markets, tax exemptions for grain shipments, and exclusive rights to build a shipyard. The Norman count's lips tighten. His men paid tithes to church coffers, not foreign traders. A lesser-known anecdote surfaces during the First Crusade. A Venetian fleet withdrew support when a proposed tribute offended the Doge's ambitions, forcing crusaders to abandon siege works along the Levantine coast. Subsequent chronicles lament that the loss of galleys cost more lives than any sword. You imagine that ancient diplomatic rupture echoed through generations, shaping Venetian caution in future pacts. You step forward to propose a compromise, allow limited Venetian toll relief for a fixed term enough to ship grain for 6 months, after which market duties resume. The Archon rubs his chin thoughtfully. The Norman count taps his gauntlet against the canopy's wooden pole. Each gesture, each moment of silence ripples through the assembled ranks like a stone dropped in still water. As midday approaches, horns sound from distant outposts, alerts to skirmishes with local raiders. Alliance delegates exchange alarmed looks. Security concerns can override commercial quarrels. A small detachment of Lombard infantry has been ambushed near a ravine, and reinforcements must be dispatched from camp. The Joint Council dissolves in an orderly flurry. Knights mount chargers, crossbowmen, shoulder quivers, and you adjust your sword belt, ready to accompany the expedition. Racing toward the outpost, the Allied forces blur into a single column, Norman cavalry leading, followed by Byzantine archers, Venetian crossbowmen, and local infantry raised for camp defense. The mixed banner overhead, a patchwork of emblems sewn together, flutters like a fragile promise against the sky. You ride between contingents, translating commands as thunder rolls in the distance. The skirmish comes quickly. Horsemen clash with raiders at the ravine's mouth, their yells echoing against stone walls carved by water long ago. You shout orders into the Archon's ear. Hold the ridge. He signals arrow volleys that hiss through the morning air, scattering raiders into gullies. The Norman knights charge, lances couched, driving foes before them, yet some slip away, melting into olive groves beyond spear's reach. Amid the fray, you taste dust and blood on the wind, adrenaline sharpening your focus. A Venetian crossbow bolt whistles past, flattening against a tree trunk. You pivot a mounted escort to cover a wounded Byzantine archer, guiding him to safety behind shield lines. In that moment, reliance on each other transcends politics. Survival demands unity forged in the crucible of combat. As the skirmish ebbs, exultant shouts mix with sobs of the wounded. Commanders survey casualties, a handful of raiders dead, but Allied losses too. 2 Lombard footmen and a Byzantine spearman. You count your companions' relief washing over you when all accounts check out. Though strategically minor, the clash tested the alliance's resolve. In shared danger, the banners that once fluttered fragilely now billow with purpose. Tonight's reflective question lingers when allies stand shoulder to shoulder in battle to shared triumphs, heal diplomatic rifts, or merely paper over deeper disputes that await the next council. Scholars still contend whether crusader coalitions sustain themselves through mutual need or fractured under the weight of competing ambitions. You unsaddle your destrier beside the still dripping aqueduct arches' banners dimmed by evening mist. As torches flicker along the valley walls, let that question echo in their glow, an enduring reminder that the strongest alliances are built not only on treaties, but on trust proven in the crucible of shared trials. You wake before dawn to a chorus of rooster calls echoing across the valley, their insistence a stark contrast to the gentle hiss of the aqueduct behind you. Today, you depart the relative calm of fortress and field to undertake a diplomatic mission, a parley with the local emir as delicate as threading a needle through armor. A well-established fact, Crusader envoys often negotiated with Muslim rulers to secure truces, trade agreements, and safe passage. These parleys required both respect and caution, for a misstep in protocol could spark renewed hostilities. You gather your few personal effects, a polished sword sheathed in leather, a parchment sealed with wax, and a small pouch of silver dinars. Then mount your horse and ride toward the emir's caravanserai on the far side of the plain. The road is a ribbon of dust and gravel beneath your hooves, lined by olive groves where dawn's light pools like liquid gold. Each branch drips with dew that glints on your cloak's fabric, a reminder that peace, like water, can nurture or drown. You pass small encampments of merchants and craftsmen, a mosaic of tents adorned with tapestries and lanterns where the scent of roasting coffee mingles with the aroma of spiced bread. A subtle detail to ensure impartiality, envoys carried white staves topped with carved doves, symbols of truce recognized by both Christian and Muslim courts. You lean on your own dove-tipped staff as you approach the caravanserai's massive gateway, its wooden doors banded with iron studs. The guard, a turcopole in chain mail, nods as you present your staff the universal token that grants you entry without challenge. Inside the courtyard unfolds like a crossroads of cultures. Camels kneel beside sleek Arabian horses, their humps rising like small hills amid straw. Courtiers in flowing robes consult illuminated scrolls, while eunuch attendants carry trays of dates, almonds, and rose-scented sherbet. You step carefully across a mosaic of colored stones, each tile worn smooth by centuries of foot traffic, and are led to an ornate tent draped in green silks, a color the emir favors. Within the tent's cool shade, you find the emir seated on low cushions around a brass brazier, its embers releasing a gentle smoke scented with oud. His robes trimmed in gold and embroidered with geometric patterns rustle softly as he rises to greet you. He places a hand over his heart in greeting, and you mirror the gesture, an exchange that bridges language as surely as any words. A well-known practice formal meetings began with offerings of illuminated manuscripts or jeweled gifts tokens demonstrating respect without imposing obligations. You present a finely bound volume of Latin psalms, its cover inset with mother of pearl and enamel. The emir's eyes narrow in appreciation as he runs a finger along the gilded edge, recognizing both craftsmanship and the gesture's diplomatic weight. The dialectic of peace is both art and gamble. You sit cross-legged opposite the emir interpreters, whispering each phrase in Arabic and then in French. You propose a mutual truce along a 10-mile stretch of desert road to protect pilgrims and merchants. The emir listens, sipping sweet mint tea from a porcelain cup, steam swirling in the morning light. A scholarly debate surfaces. Did such treaties reflect genuine goodwill, or were they tactical pauses exploited by both sides to regroup and resupply? Some historians argue these agreements reduced civilian suffering and fostered limited coexistence. Others note that breaches were common, as shifting alliances and local power struggles undercut central authority. As you outline caravan routes and security protocols, guards to escort pilgrims, tolls waived for humble travelers, you notice the emir's attendant discreetly unroll a map marked with oases and bandit hideouts. He points to a cluster of red X's and offers to supply additional guides to navigate those perilous stretches. You nod, recognizing that local knowledge often trumped formal accords. A curious anecdote: one crusader envoy reportedly sealed a truce by planting a fig sapling in the citadel courtyard, symbolizing shared roots and future growth. You dip your staff's dove into a small clay pot of pomegranate seeds, a regional variant, and place them in a silver bowl before the emir, a gesture he accepts with a small approving smile. Negotiations shift to prisoner exchanges. Crusader knights held captive in coastal forts for equal numbers of Muslim soldiers taken during raids. You propose a neutral site by the riverbank at dusk, where prisoners can be swapped under guard. The emir concurs, stipulating that the wounded be exchanged first to receive care. You acknowledge this concession, recognizing both its humanity and its strategic value. Beyond formalities, personal rapport cements agreements. You discuss shared admiration for poetry, Virgil on your side, Ibn Khafaja on his. An interpreter recites a few verses, and both sides laugh at the translator's occasional missteps, revealing common ground beneath banners and beliefs. As the meeting concludes, the emir rises and offers a final cup of tea. He extends his hand, palm open, a gesture of mutual respect that transcends speeches. You place your hand atop his, a silent vow to uphold the pact. Courtiers' rise trumpets sound across the courtyard, and the two courts exchange formal farewells under green and red standards snapping in the breeze. Suggestions for improvement. You awaken beneath a sky brushed with pale lavender, the first bird song drifting across the camp like an echo of distant drums. Today you sift through battlefield memories, an excavation of scars, both flesh and mind, gathering fragments of triumph and trauma before they slip into dust. A well-known fact, medieval knights and foot soldiers carried physical reminders of war scar tissue amputations and lingering aches from wounds that never fully healed. Chroniclers note that many crusaders bore arrowheads lodged in bone or survived lance strikes that left metal splinters beneath the skin. You run a cautious hand along the faint ridge on your forearm where a crossbow bolt grazed you weeks ago, recalling how warmth faded to ice when the steel struck home. Beneath visible injuries lie subtler traces. You kneel beside a shallow grave dug for a fallen companion, its earth still soft. Letters tied to the knight's wrist, promises to return home, lie scattered like brittle petals. You close your eyes, breathing in the mingled scents of damp soil and wild thyme, remembering the final moments, a scream cut short a shield, clattering against stone, the hush that followed. A curious aside, some crusaders tattooed symbols, crosses saints' names, or simple hearts over scar sites, believing the ink would seal wounds against infection and serve as holy guardians against future harm. Archaeologists uncovered faint blue-green pigment beside healed wounds on skeletal remains near Antioch, hinting that these tattoos offered both spiritual comfort and primitive antisepsis. You trace an imaginary symbol over a healed cut on your calf, feeling its rough memory beneath your palm. As the sun climbs, you gather with fellow veterans beneath a battered pavilion. Each bears a story etched into gait or gaze the archer, whose shoulder collapse still hinders his draw the squire, whose limp speaks of a battle he never thought he'd survive. The cook whose nightmares linger in the clatter of pots. You exchange soft nods, the unspoken language of shared pain and pride, and pass around a flask of thick spiced wine. Its warmth seeps into bones, stiffened by past wounds, momentarily easing aches that no salve can touch. Yet, not all injuries reside in flesh. You close your eyes and hear the clash of steel, the shrill cry of trumpets, the anguished pleas of the wounded. Memory folds time inward. One moment you stand victorious on a heap of shields, the next you recoil at the flash of molten oil raining from parapets. The mind's eye can be as unforgiving as any siege engine, replaying horrors when least expected, a sudden shout, the fall of a cartwheel, even the quiet drip of water reminding you of blood. A lesser-known truth, some crusaders carried carved wooden talismans, small figures of Christ or Mary, that they pressed to their temples during flashbacks, seeking solace in sacred form amid chaos. In rare cases, where patterns on these figurines correspond to indentations on skulls, suggesting that soldiers used them like early clinical tools against what we now call PTSD. You reach into your pouch for a tiny carved Madonna, her features worn smooth by decades of touch, and hold her to your heart. As midday heat settles on the valley, you walk to the edge of a silent field where banners lie half buried in sand and poppies bloom through shattered armor. You kneel to collect a rusted spur, feeling the weight of pride and regret it once bore. You imagine the horse that galloped unbridled when its rider fell, the thunder of hoofbeats fading into wind-swept emptiness. Each relic here tells 1,000 stories, none of them neat or heroic. A modern scholarly debate whispers at the edge of your consciousness. When history's victors write chronicles, do they sanitize suffering to glorify conquest? Or do they faithfully preserve the raw agony of war? Some argue that embellished tales of heroism eclipse countless private tragedies, while others contend that frank memoirs rare in medieval texts reveal more about human resilience than any epic poem. You wonder which version of events you will pass on and how its truth will shape those who come after. Evening's hush finds you by a flickering lantern sifting through a journal stained with sweat and ink. You write of healed scars, restless dreams, and a worn Madonna that anchors your thoughts. You pause to ink a question in the margin when memory bleeds into myth. Where do we find the authentic voice of those who endured? Scholars will argue over charred scrolls and oral fragments, but your own reflection must settle somewhere within that tension. As night drapes its velvet over the camp, you press the carved Madonna to your lips and whisper a gentle prayer for the fallen, the scarred, and the healing yet to come. You tuck the journal into your cloak, feeling its weight like a pledge to remember. You pause at the edge of camp as twilight settles the sky, a soft canvas of lavender and rose. The clamor of shields and trumpets has faded into distant memory, replaced by the gentle chorus of crickets and the lapping of water in the newly built aqueduct. You draw in a slow breath, tasting the mingled scents of pine smoke and evening dew, and feel the day's weight lift, if only by a fraction. In the hush, you reflect on the tapestry of experiences woven through these 20 parts marches through mud and desert sieges that shattered walls and spirits, diplomatic dances beneath exotic tents, and the intimate rituals that soothed wounded bodies and minds. You remember the clang of metal on metal, the hush of prayers in shadowed chapels, the hiss of water carving stone, and the soft coo of dove-tipped staves. Each moment, from the roar of battle to the whisper of a healing poultice, carries forward in memory like stones in an unending aqueduct of time. Tonight, you acknowledge the scars that both define and defy you, the healed wounds that ache in cold mornings, the nightmares that flicker when torches gutter low, and the medals of gratitude you carried, scarred spurs, carved Madonnas, and stray coins. Yet you also hold close the tokens of hope, the fig sapling planted in ruined courtyards, the shared flasks of wine beneath starlit skies, the laughter that rose among weary comrades. These fragments of humanity strung together form a fragile but enduring thread that binds the past to the promise of tomorrow. As you settle onto a weathered bench by the crackling hearth, you let your guard down and listen to the crackle of flames, the sigh of passing wind, the distant murmur of centuries. In this moment of quiet, you honor both the triumphs and the trials, knowing that even the hardest stones yield to water's patient flow. Even the oldest tales have something new to say if we listen gently. May this moment of quiet carry you through the night like a soft breeze through open windows. That's the story for tonight. May your dreams be filled with wonder and peace.
In the silent winter night, as the last flicker of candlelight in the thatched cottage dimmed and a sliver of moonlight slipped through the uneven roof, the damp straw below glimmered faintly in silver. From outside came the soft clucks of hens settling into their nests and the whisper of the wind stirring the wooden beams. Amidst that worn, golden straw lay an infant swaddled in a warm strip of yellow cloth, lips pressed together in slumber within the humble stable. Beside the manger knelt a man in a green tunic, eyes alight with equal measures of worry and wonder. Two women knelt nearby, their forms shadowed against the darkness, one clutching a white hen to her chest, the other pressing her hand gently to her pregnant belly. Above them, a circular carving of a mother hen sheltering her brood crowned the rafters, lending an almost sacred hush to the moment. It was as if heaven and earth held their breath, waiting to witness a miraculous destiny just beginning to unfold. Chapter 1. A Dawn in the Straw-Filled Stable. In the faint glow of the lone oil lamp hanging from a rafter, the small thatched cottage beside the village lay in a profound stillness, as though nothing extraordinary were about to take place. A chilly winter wind crept into the gaps in the roof, carrying with it the mingled scent of fresh hay and damp, moldy undertones from recent days of drizzle. On the cold, damp ground inside the stable, patches of dry straw clung to the feathers of the chickens, evidence of the relentless, persistent rain. Outside on the low-hanging eaves, hens, roosters, and chicks waited patiently for the downpour to finally cease, pecking at bits of grain amid the straw. A sliver of waning moonlight shone down as a silvery carpet, making the scattered straw shimmer like a field of golden embers. Amid the damp straw, resting in an old wooden manger, lay an infant swaddled snugly in a warm, pale golden cloth. Only the infant's serene, sleeping face was visible, a tiny bud of life glowing softly against the rugged backdrop of the stable. From outside came the distant echo of roosters crowing and the soft rustle of straw shifting as the chickens scratched about. A man with deep olive green eyes and a tall, lean frame knelt beside the manger, clad in a long tunic of forest green and a muted gray-green cloak. He pressed his hands together in prayer, his gaze tenderly fixed on the child. Under the dim lamplight, his face bore the lines of worry shaded by a profound, unspoken joy. To his left, near the stable's edge, knelt two women determined to find peace in this lonely night. One wore a warm reddish-orange dress with a pale yellow headscarf wrapped tightly around her head. Her hands rested gently on her abdomen as though she felt the child's heartbeat mirrored in her own. The second woman, clad in a deep indigo gown with a simple white linen veil over her head, cradled a white hen in her arms, as though even the family's fowl deserved protection in the chill air. Her thin arms clutched the hen's soft feathers, evoking an image both delicate and resolute. High atop the stable's gabled roof, a small circular carving depicted a mother hen sheltering her brood, a quiet symbol of guardianship and protection that seemed to bless the humble scene below. Amid the silence of the night, broken only by the wind's soft moan and the patter of straw, the tableau felt both utterly ordinary, like a rural farm scene, and mysteriously sacred, as if lifted from the pages of a medieval illuminated manuscript. The world beyond the stable's walls seemed to vanish, leaving only the hush of the family's vigil. No one could yet know what fate awaited the child drifting peacefully in that manger. In this moment, however, wrapped in the straw and candlelight, the newborn represented new hope. To the man kneeling, his weathered features alight with fatherly devotion, the child was a promise. He vowed that this tiny life would be protected with every ounce of his devotion. The two women, though bearing the weariness of the world on their shoulders, knelt in quiet prayer, trusting that this child would somehow thrive despite the hardships. Chapter 2. The Journey Home. The next morning, the first light of spring trickled through the cracked plaster of the small cottage, casting golden beams across the damp flagstones of the narrow path leading to an arched courtyard gate. The cock's crowing was joined now by the laughter and chatter of children playing in the village below. Inside the humble stable, the green-clad man from the night before stood expectantly at the wooden doorway, his eyes flicking with concern as a small procession of strangers approached. At their forefront walked a young nobleman wearing a burnt orange cloak edged with forest green trim. Beneath it, he sported a green tunic finely embroidered at the cuffs, and he cradled a heavy leather-bound book beneath one arm. Beside him, a handmaiden in a flowing jade gown carried a bundle of straw in her arms, bowing respectfully to the man in the doorway. The young noble spoke in a calm, measured tone, his dark beard neatly trimmed. "We have received word that a young woman has given birth in dire poverty in a nearby hamlet. We wish, if it pleases you, to be taken to this place so we may bear witness ourselves." The green-clad man's expression changed instantly, shifting from concern to guarded curiosity. The memory of the straw-lined manger from hours before flickered in the noble's eyes. With a steady nod, the man gestured for them to enter the small house, where a thin woman lay resting on a rough wooden bed against the far wall. Pale morning light filtered in through the arched doorway behind her, revealing the exhaustion etched into her face. She stirred as the noble and his entourage stepped in. It was the mother of the newborn from the stable. Through a croak in her throat, she addressed the noble as he approached. "My lord, if you have come for that child." "I hardly know how to explain. I gave birth in this straw-filled stable alone. My parents have long since passed, and the child's father abandoned me once he learned I was expecting. I have managed alone, without a coin to my name, just as you see." The green-clad man moved to her side, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "My lord," he implored the noble, "pray do not dismiss us entirely. We are but poor folk who have endured hardship and illness. If you find no value in the child, we will gratefully accept your mercy to care for its mother and kin." The young noble gave a half-smile, placing a hand on the mother's quilt. Then, his gaze drifted to the small bundle of golden straw in the corner, recalling the child's warm breath in the darkness. He exhaled slowly and said, "I do not relish empty superstitions, but if this child was born in such a most unusual place, then perhaps there is something extraordinary within him. We will take him to the northern keep. There the wise and learned may confirm whether he bears any divine mark. Until then, attend to his mother and him, and keep them safe." The green-clad man bowed his head and pressed the noble's hand gratefully. "We thank your grace. If the child bears no gift, show us mercy. If so, we trust in your compassion." With that, the noble turned to his handmaiden. "You two go ahead and guide them. I will follow close behind. Bring medicinal herbs, dried bread, and a few hens so the mother and child have sustenance on the road." They departed along the winding country lane, the man with the infant cradled in his arms, the cold breeze stirring the mother's hair and the edges of the weathered cloth that wrapped the baby. The child slept soundly, oblivious to the forested hills and misty swamps they passed, unaware that he slumbered so near the edge of destiny. Before the noble could leave the small dwelling, the green-clad man knelt once more at the threshold of the stable and bowed his head. "Thank you, your grace. May heaven bear witness to our gratitude." A final sob from the mother, echoing against the tattered wooden walls, followed the traveling party as they melted into the countryside. Chapter 3: Discovery at the Mistbound Keep. The journey spanned many leagues across fields dotted with ancient oak trees, their skeletal branches clattering in the harsh spring wind. Rays of grayish sunlight fractured through shifting banks of mist, momentarily draping the land in silver. Atop a gentle rise stood the craggy keep, its stone walls coated in greenish moss, with a turret poking skyward like the tip of a spear aimed at the clouds. Its great oak doors, heavy and cracked, sat closed as if challenging anyone to enter. When the procession arrived, the imposing gates creaked open under the touch of guards clad in polished chainmail. Their helmets caught the pale dawn light as they formed a silent aisle leading the travelers into a vast paved courtyard. A small fountain gurgled faintly at its center, the water falling in delicate arcs as though testing the chill air. Stained glass windows, depicting saints and biblical scenes, cast kaleidoscopic reflections across the flagstones. Inside the great hall, the noble, now flanked by advisors and officials, stood before a marble dais, the carved dragons and phoenixes on its edges gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. Portraits on the walls recounted epic voyages and holy miracles. One image unmistakably showed a child laid in a manger scene, mirroring the very scene that brought them here. The noble spoke with steely composure. "We have brought this child, whom rumor claims was born amidst animals in a humble stable, to this place. Let learned men and women examine him. Should he possess any divine mark, make it known. If not, we shall return him to his mother, and end this matter." An elder statesman presided from a seat of honor. His gray hair framed a face carved by years of governance and prayer. "Very well," he replied in a gravelly voice. "Summon our wisest physicians, astrologers, and spiritual guides." In bygone ages, texts spoke of children born under a waning moon in such humble settings as forebears of great change. We shall confirm whether this child is touched by providence or simply a peasant's offspring. After a respectful nod from the noble, attendants escorted the mother and child into a small side chamber. The mother perched herself on a narrow bed, hugging her bundle closely, while the attending surgeon, an aging man with sunken eyes and ink-stained fingertips, prepared his instruments of glass and metal. He inspected the baby's face, feeling for pulses, mapping each freckle and vein. "Born on such a night, with the moon low and the stars arranged thus," he mumbled, tracing a quill across parchment. "The child carries the sign of the celestial radiance. Yet his flesh bears no blemish nor weakness, save an uncommon warmth beneath his skin. The mother whispered, her voice trembling. Surely you do not subscribe to mere superstition. He is my son, and I will protect him. The physician, eyes glinting in intrigue, waved his hand. I rely not on superstition but on prognosis and study. Yet this child's reaction to my salves is unexpected. He uncovered a small bowl of herbal decoction and dabbed a smudge to the child's brow. The mother stifled a gasp as a faint blush rose and then dissipated from the baby's skin within heartbeats. Remarkable, he said softly. His resistance is beyond mortal. He may live through the harshest winter. Plague might pass him by as if he were touched by something extraordinary. Meanwhile, a group of venerable monks had gathered in a circle outside the chamber, chanting prayers in hushed tones. Their voices echoed through the marble corridors, each syllable a plea for the child's well-being. The fragrance of incense swirled in the air as they burned frankincense, and the smoke wreathed around the pillars, imparting a sense of solemnity as though heaven were itself leaning in to listen. Chapter 4. Sacred Care and Divine Imagery. The next morning, the child was placed in a chamber adorned with draperies of deep teal and crimson, the walls painted in motifs of cherubic angels and swirling vines. A soft rug of scarlet lay underfoot, offering warmth against the stone. The mother, her robes now exchanged for finer linens, sat close at her son's side, while the nobleman hovered near the door, anxiety etched on his face. The child, now cradled on a bed of golden straw within a small alcove painted in shades of greenish blue, stirred as though sensing the swirl of incense and candlelight. A holy sister, her head unshrouded and framed by a faint golden halo, knelt beside him, cradling him gently. Her gown of deep crimson spilled around her knees, white undersleeves hugging her wrists. As she fed the child from a simple clay bowl, the faint glow of the halo glinted off her serene features, and villagers murmured prayers of gratitude. Outside the alcove, a woman in a cerulean gown edged with white stood holding a basket brimming with bread and fruits. She smiled at the child's mother, then edged forward, offering sustenance. Meanwhile, a cluster of white and gray hens scratched in the straw-laden floor, pecking at stray grains as though drawn by the hush of holiness. Behind them, the walls glowed a muted gold, adorned with circular medallions showing saintly faces, each encircled by delicate filigree and ochre tones. Soft candlelight danced upon the mosaic floor, making the mosaics seem to shimmer like dust-kissed fireflies in the dusk. Outside the alcove's door, villagers knelt in silence, farmers and simple craftsmen, their weathered hands folded in reverence. They came bearing humble offerings, bowls of porridge, jars of honey, hand-woven cloth to shield the child from winter's chill. In this moment, even a modest henhouse within the keep became a sacred space where life and devotion converged in gentle harmony. Chapter 5. Teaching and a Brewing Crisis. Following the child's initial examinations, he was moved to a small, quiet chamber hung with tapestries illustrating scenes of compassion and mercy. The mother slept on a modest bed of carved wood and soft linens, comforted at last by better garments and a sense of security. The child, who was now old enough to perceive, began each day with lessons in basic scripture and morality, his little hands tracing the curves of ancient runes upon parchment as novice monks guided him in simple prayers. Outside, however, a creeping unease spread through the keep and its surrounding villages. A sudden outbreak of plague swept through the outer hamlets, claiming the elderly and the infirm. As rumors of pestilence and catastrophe reached the keep, an ominous whisper took shape that the child, born under miraculous signs, was himself a harbinger of doom, or worse, a demonic pawn. A faction of courtiers, far more interested in their own narrow ambitions than any child's safety, began spreading malicious rumors. One evening, as the candles flickered low in the dim corridors, the young noble was confronted by a veiled messenger bearing an ominous warning. If that child lives, your influence wanes, your grace. If he truly possesses celestial power, you will be cast aside and your name reviled. The noble's jaw clenched in frustration. He retorted, voice quivering with resolve. I do not wish to harm a child, but if I must protect him at all costs, I will. Such slander has no basis. Meanwhile, the chapel's aged abbot and his acolytes worked tirelessly to keep hope alive. Their gentle chants echoed through stone naves, candles reflecting off stained glass depictions of angels guiding lost souls. The abbot implored the noble. We must guard the boy. These slanders spring from fear and ignorance. Let me lead a procession of prayer and light to shield him. But the noble, haunted by threats of betrayal and power struggles, responded with weary frustration. Every day brings new peril. If I do nothing, conspiracies grow bolder. Say the boy first, then quell the treachery. Thus did the keep's hushed tranquility fracture, replaced by overlapping currents of devotion and dread. Chapter 6. A night of desperate struggle. In the farthest chamber of the keep, a dim, narrow room where a single candle sputtered, sat the mother, her son nestled in her arms, both swathed in fine wool to ward off the night's chill. The plague's ghostly shadow hovered beyond the stone walls, and the mother, haggard and pale, often awoke in a panic, sure she'd lost him in her dreams. The baby rested peacefully, oblivious to the plotting that pulsed beyond the heavy oak door. In the dead of night, a figure draped in dark robes slipped into that very chamber. The candle's fluttering light revealed a hired assassin, a gaunt man with cruel eyes, slipping a small vial of poison into a clay cup. The mother stirred, sensing an intruder. Her heart hammered as she realized the man intended to harm her child. In one swift motion, she lunged from the bed, grabbing his arm. She strained to hold him, her nails digging into his wrist as he tried to pull free. A whisper of steel sliced through the darkness. Another conspirator, waiting just outside, thrust a dagger through the crack in the door. The assassin let out a strangled cry as the blade found its mark. Blood spurted into the candlelight, staining the wooden floor. The mother, panic-stricken, clutched her son and screamed, her voice echoing through the silent halls. Outside, the alarm bells clanged with urgent clangs. Guards in chainmail, swords drawn, flooded the corridors. The plague's fear turned to fear of treachery as the clash of steel rang through the keep. Within moments, the three conspirators, 2 assassins, and the mysterious instigator were seized and bound. Though they had hoped to extinguish a life they deemed troublesome, they were instead caught in the violent throng of justice. The noble, awakened by the uproar, raced through the torchlit corridors. His boots thundered on flagstones still damp from the night's chill. Bursting into the chamber, he beheld the child's mother cradling her son, tears and sweat streaking her ashen cheeks. He dropped to his knees and gathered the infant into his arms, his face wrought with guilt. "I failed you both. I will not let this harm come again." Outside, the clash of guards drove the frightened conspirators into submission. But the noble's heart was already racing with new urgency. He realized the life of this child, so vulnerable, had become the fulcrum of his own destiny. Chapter 7. A miracle of light. Beyond the clamor of captivity, in the highest tower's inner sanctuary, the abbot and his monks gathered in prayer. Candles flickered in a cold, vaulted chamber as the abbot intoned incantations for protection and healing. Their voices formed a low, steady hum that resonated through the stone walls as though evoking solace from the ether itself. Outside, the keep's gates remained shut tight, unyielding to the plague that battered the land. Within the mother's chamber, as the fight waned, shouts faded to muffles, the candle's flame flared violently. The wax erupted in swirls of emerald and crimson fire, casting wild shadows across the walls. The newborn, tucked in his mother's loving arms, stirred, his little body glowing with a soft, aquamarine light. The mother's eyes widened in awe as she pressed her hand protectively over him, feeling warmth suffuse through her trembling fingers. At the window's sill, the gilded painting of a saintly visage. The very scene of the child's miraculous birth seemed to glow in step with the baby's luminous aura. The mother, overcome with wonder, murmured, "My child, what power dwells within you?" Below, the nobleman had sprinted to a high window. From this vantage, he watched the candles flare and witnessed the child bathed in that azure glow. A gasp escaped his lips. It is true, a miracle. In his mind's eye, possibilities unfurled like banners in the wind. If he truly carries this divine spark, I must guard him at all costs. Let no conspiracy snuff out this light. Back in the great hall, as rumors of the child's wondrous radiance spread, swords fell silent, cries of aggression died on the lips of soldiers. Every man at arms lowered his weapon, eyes lifted to the turret battlements, and a hush descended. Even the gloom-laden corridors felt an unexpected warmth, as if a transcendent presence stood in solidarity with the child and his mother. Chapter 8. Renewal and Reconciliation. After the glow receded, leaving only a gentle warmth in its wake, the infant returned to his mother's arms as though he had merely shifted in slumber. The mother wept softly, pressing his small face to her chest, grateful tears streaming into his hair. The noble, having rushed into the chamber, knelt before her, tears glistening in his eyes. He lifted the child and bowed low. Forgive me, Mother. I failed in protecting him. But now I see, this child's destiny may be greater than any of us can fathom. The mother clasped her son tightly, a faint tear marking his cheek as she looked at the noble with solemn gratitude. He was a gift from heaven. I only sought to protect him. Below, in the great hall, the elder statesman and all the assembled courtiers and advisors knelt, their eyes shining with reverence. The elder's voice then boomed. This is proof of divine presence. Any who doubt shall face consequences for accusing the innocent. The noble placed the infant gently on a cushioned dais. Reverently he turned to the gathering. From this moment on, no harm shall come to him. Let him be taught of mercy and compassion. A chorus of applause rose, and the keep's residents from steward to serf cried out in celebration. Swayed by the miracle, the faction conspiring to destroy the child stepped forward, kneeling before the noble. With tears streamed down their faces, they confessed their calumnies and pledged loyalty anew. An elder monk then addressed the crowd. Let us consecrate this child in prayer, so that he may grow in wisdom and empathy. If any still harbor malice, may divine justice turn them to righteousness. Roughly a year passed. Spring returned again, and the keep, once plagued and broken, now thrived with blooming orchards and golden fields. The child, now called Andreas, walked the halls, clad in a silk tunic of sky blue and gold embroidery. Crowned with the humble straw from his birthplace as a token, he offered blessings to all who came before him. Beneath the dais, bowls of chicken broth, herbal remedies, and freshly baked bread stood ready, laid out by grateful villagers. The boy's mother, now clad in a gleaming white robe, watched from a side dais, her heart swelling with pride and sorrow. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "My child has fulfilled his purpose. He has shown us the meaning of faith." The noble, elevated now to the title Duke of Light's Vigil, stood behind the dais and addressed the statesman. "Your guidance and the monk's prayers saved him. He is our blessing." The statesman bowed deeply, his voice thick. "Andreas is heaven's messenger. In his presence, cruelty and fear dissolve." As music played throughout the keep, harps, lutes, flutes weaving melodies of hope, Andreas took a small harp. With a trembling child's voice, he sang 2 lines of verse. "In humble straw, life's ember glows. A light of love through winter's throes." Silence fell as every soul listened, then applause swelled as a tide. Children clapped in delight, elders wept in gratitude. The church bells rang out, and for a moment, all fear and discord seemed banished by that simple, shining truth. Chapter 9. A peaceful countryside reimagined. A year later, fields of barley swayed beneath azure skies, the keep's sturdy walls eclipsed by blossoming cherry trees. Duke Andreas, now 5 years old, traveled with his parents through sunlit villages, distributing bread and healing herbs to the poor. He spoke with kindly eyes to every child, offering encouragement even to the most ailing. "Fear not, dear friend. Spring always returns." Villagers would weep with joy, kissing his hands, while farmers set fresh eggs and poultry by the roadside in thanks. Among them, hens pecked at stray grain, unconcerned by the noble procession. In the distance, a modest wooden shelter built atop a gentle knoll stood as a tribute to the innocent beginnings, a straw-lined manger next to a small coop. The Duke explained to his son, "Here is where you came from, a simple stable amidst the veldt. Remember that humility is the foundation of your heart." The boy nodded solemnly, stroking a young chick that nestled against his boot. He turned to his father. "I will not forget. Every life is precious." That evening, as the crimson sun sank behind the hills, the boy sat upon a straw bale, gazing at the vibrant glow. He closed his eyes and silently prayed. "Grant all your creatures peace. Let fear be banished and love endure." A soft breeze rustled the straw as if echoing his plea. At that moment, a flock of hens beneath the coop scattered in a flurry of feathers, then settled quietly once more, uneasy, perhaps, in the presence of such grace. The Duke glanced at his son, pride and wonder mixing in his eyes. "Your words are the balm the world needs." From that day forward, travelers spoke of the joyful Duke and the blessed child of the stable, and the once humble mound of straw blossomed into a place of pilgrimage. Pilgrims left baskets of poultry feed and straw at the manger, believing that in honoring Andreas's birthplace, they shared in his divine favor. Chapter 10. Legacy of the Manger. Seasons passed, and the Duke's realm thrived in prosperity. Under the steady guidance of Duke Andrius, famine and disease receded. Villagers cultivated their fields with renewed vigor. Children grew up learning from the Duke's teachings of compassion and humility. Each spring, a festival filled the hills with laughter. Costumed dancers imitated the pecking hens, musicians played lilting jigs, and families shared hearty stews of chicken and barley. At the heart of it all lay a small, straw-lined manger, retained within a simple wooden shelter, its planks engraved with phrases of peace. Andrius, now a bright and eloquent 10-year-old, would stand in the center of the festival grounds, sharing his story in gentle verses. From humble straw, the light was born, a gift of grace on winter's morn. Villagers, from blacksmiths and bakers to weavers and shepherds, listened intently. They offered eggs, fresh herbs, and woven ribbons as tributes, symbols that all shared in the child's miracle. The Duke looked on, his silvering hair caught in the breeze, and knelt beside his son, pressing a father's kiss to Andrius's brow. He thought back to the night in that dark stable, how a newborn's prayer for mercy had reshaped an entire realm. The once hopeless cottage of straw had become the cornerstone of a legacy that transcended time. When times grew hard once more, storms flooding the fields, sickness descending on the elderly, the people rekindled their faith in the child's promise. They prayed at the straw-lined shelter, not because they expected magic to erase all suffering, but because they knew in their hearts that hope and unity could overcome any darkness. And so, the humble stable's memory endured. In every humble straw, in every clucking hen, in every child's bright eyes, people felt whisperings of Andrius's miracle, reminders that love and light can bloom in even the humblest of beginnings. Across generations, mothers told their children of the child of the manger, fathers shared the story by hearth fires. Each pilgrimage to the straw mound ended with a banquet of roasted poultry and barley bread, an act of thanksgiving for life's simple blessings. People of all stations, nobles and peasants alike, set aside their grievances to share in a common bond. The knowledge that from dire poverty and vulnerability could yet spring a force of compassion strong enough to change the world. In the end, the tiny infant who first opened his eyes under a tattered roof had sown the seeds of a new era, one where humility triumphed over pride, kindness triumphed over fear, and love triumphed over hatred. The flickering candle of that winter night remained alive in each heart, a steadfast flame guiding humankind through every storm. And thus, the legacy of the manger, born in an unassuming straw-filled stable, remained a testament to the enduring power of mercy and the miracle that, no matter how bleak, hope can shine forth in the darkest hour. Epilogue. Notes on the tale of the manger. This tale spans over 4,000 words in American English, tracing the narrative from the humble stable birth through the trials at the mist-bound keep to the final flourishing inheritance of compassion. The storyline is drawn entirely from a detailed visual analysis of 5 critical images, each focusing on the stable setting, the color palette, the figure's attire, and the symbolism of divine light. It is intended that the legacy of the manger serve as a parable of faith, resilience, and the redemptive power of compassion, reminding readers that profound miracles often begin in the most unassuming places. End. Chapter 1. A warm straw stall in the midst of winter. At the threshold between night and dawn, when the sky was still pale from the lingering clouds hovering overhead, a chill wind from the north whispered through the gaps in the red-tiled roof of the cottage perched on the hillside. Inside that century-old, thatch-roofed home, where the faint strains of folk music still lingered from the main room, a lone candle flickered, casting a dancing glow upon a young man lying cradled in a thick bed of damp straw. The straw's golden warmth contrasted starkly with the biting winter air. Outside in the adjacent coop, hens nestled into their nests against the cold, while roosters crowed in the muted pre-dawn hush. And in that quiet moment, as the final embers of candlelight danced atop the rafters, Destiny quietly slipped into a humble straw stall. His name was Lewin, a 19-year-old whose skin was weathered by seasons working the fields and whose deep blue eyes had once danced with life. Since childhood, and had followed his father, an unassuming farmer, across emerald paddy fields, plucking feathers from chickens and kindling fires to brew chicken porridge for livestock. He had reveled in wide stretches of sky, laughing with playmates as they chased each other through golden fields at harvest time. Yet that morning, an unexpected fever had struck him in the dead of night. A storm had borne a deadly ailment into their region from distant northern plains. The disease spread quickly, first to the cattle, then the villagers. Indon, though young and robust, had collapsed under its weight. His father, untrained in herbal remedies, had fetched bundles of dried grasses to cushion his son and boiled ginger to coax warmth into his failing limbs, then sat by the stall, gazing at his son's straw-padded bed with a heart full of dread. Inside that humble stall, a simple wooden enclosure with rough-hewn planks for walls and a red-tiled roof capped by a small gilded relief. It was Anne's older sister, Tam, and his sister-in-law, Mai, who hovered anxiously at his side. Tam, 16 years old with wide, dark eyes and hair like raven wings, gently stitched a crimson undershirt for her brother, biting her lip to hold back tears. Mai, a neighboring woman of serene beauty whose cheeks were speckled with a light dusting of freckles, tightened the grip on the white hen she held in her arms, perhaps believing that the hen's warmth might keep the fever at bay. On the ridge of the roof above them, a golden carving of a mother hen sheltering her brood glowed as if it carried an unspoken blessing, lending the stall an almost sacred hush. Unlay swaddled in a pale yellow cloth, his fragile face the only part visible against the bed of straw, as firelight flickered across his features. He listened to the distant rustle of feathered creatures, the low murmur of the coop. Beside him, Tam whispered, Stay with us a little longer. I found fresh gotu-kola leaves. Mom will boil them into a tonic. Your fever will break soon, I promise." And nodded weakly, too fever-stricken to offer more than a faint smile. The thatch walls and coops of hens were simple markers of his family's humble life. Above the stall, the gilded relief of the mother hen and her brood appeared to glow in the candlelight, as though heaven itself watched over them. The faint crackle of the fire, the aroma of dried ginger, the soft clucking of hens, and the moan of the northern wind combined into a gentle lullaby. In that moment, though his body burned with fever, a spark of hope flickered deep within him. His name was Lewin. He had once run barefoot across sunlit rice paddies, chased flitting swallows at dawn, and marveled at wide, open skies. Now, as he drifted in and out of fever dreams, his father's safe hands and his sister's tender stitches were his anchors. Perhaps, in the depths of his delirium, and sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding. Something that would alter the fate of his entire village. Chapter 2, Memories of Home. And stirred as if waking from a long journey. The fever had receded slightly, and for an instant he imagined himself standing amid a boundless golden rice field. A gentle breeze sculpted ripples across the ripening stalks, and the distant call of a rooster heralded dawn. In that dream, he felt his bare feet press into muddy soil as water splashed around his ankles, and he gazed upward at a sky so vast it seemed endless. But almost as quickly as it appeared, the vision dissolved into the straw beneath him. He blinked and realized he was still in that wooden stall, still wrapped in the pale yellow cloth, still ill, but now somewhat more lucid. By his side, Tam adjusted his sash, smoothing out folds of cloth. She whispered, "And are you awake?" The rooster crowed twice. "Day is breaking. Drink this ginger brew. It'll help break the fever." He tried to lift his head to look at her, but only managed a faint nod. The aroma of ginger rose from the small bowl she pressed into his lips, and drew in the warm, pungent steam and swallowed a sip. It slid through his throat, kindling something like warmth in his veins. Just beyond the stall, his father knelt, shuffling straw into the bed to keep it fresh. The coop's hen shifted restlessly, as if sensing his awakening, and heard the low rumble of his father's voice, just a soft murmur, pleading for his son's quick recovery, and sank back into the straw, feeling a current of relief and gratitude wash over him. Tam dabbed a cool cloth to his brow. "You scared us all," and she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I think you'll be well soon," and managed a weak smile. Though the fever still claimed his strength, he felt the slightest glimmer of life returning. He focused on Tam's calm presence, on the gentleness in Mai's eyes as she stroked the hen's feathers, and on his father's silent devotion. All around him, the coop's hen scratched in the straw, the stall's roof echoed with the soft creak of timbers, and outside, the wind whispered among the bamboo growths. And wants to get up, he croaked at last, his voice raspy from fever. "I want to stand outside, breathe fresh air." Tam glanced at Mai, then gently propped his shoulders. "Let me help you sit, but you must rest before you wander too far." Mai struck a match at the corner of the wooden lantern on the wall. The small flame illuminated the rough wood and the clusters of straw below. She offered him the crimson undershirt, which Tam had sewn. "Put this on so you don't catch cold," she urged, and gingerly swung his legs off the straw bed, feeling dizzy. But as he straightened, the fever's grip loosened, thanks in part to that ginger brew, thanks in part to the kindness around him, and perhaps in part to something more inexplicable. In that moment, he sensed that his ordeal was only the beginning of something far greater. Chapter 3. The Rooster's Cry and Fear's Arrival. By the time he steadied himself, the sun had fully risen, and pale morning light filtered through the barn's open doorway. The hens scattered at his feet, clucking in greeting. Tam and my led him outside, where his father waited just beyond the coop. The crispness of dawn, tinged with the scent of rice stalks, felt like a benediction. But just as they stepped onto the dirt path, a tall figure clothed in a blue tunic and brown hat appeared at the far end of the lane. It was Lanvan, the village chief who oversaw grain stores and safeguarded the community. He strode forward, clutching a large cloth bundle at his side, his face drawn with tension. Brother Tran, Lanvan greeted his father. I bring troubling news. The pestilence that struck Rang Xa has spread faster than anyone expected. They've already buried 30 households there. People are fleeing in panic. We must reinforce the levee and prepare rice supplies. If the disease crosses this river, it will reach our own families. His father's face turned grave. Has it already reached Rang Xa? That's just across the river. I thought we were safe. Lanvan shook his head. Some say it's not a typical contagion. Whomever it touches withers in a single night. They've been burying entire families alive. That's why I came early to warn you. We need to strengthen our defenses. His mother, who had joined them, gasped in fear. But I cannot abandon my son. He's just growing stronger from his fever. I bedded him on straw to keep him warm. I cannot bear to see him leave. Lanvan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You must protect him here. He's still too weak to travel. We'll set up a system to pass clean water from the river up to the levee, so that if the sickness approaches, we can pour herbal tinctures into the water to push it back. We're fortunate that he survived. His recovery is a miracle. He must stay here. Tam lowered her gaze and spoke softly. Chief, I will care for my brother. You have our word. If anything happens, we'll rely on the neighbors for help. Lanvan nodded, though his face remained clouded with worry. I understand. Keep watch, and if any symptoms return, use incense smoke to ward off the disease. That is the old remedy we have for plague. With that, Lanvan turned and walked off, leaving the family standing at the edge of their yard. His mother hugged him fiercely, her heart pounding. Son, you must stay strong. We cannot let the sickness return. And nodded. Inside, he felt determined. Though his body had been ravaged by fever, his spirit burned with a stubborn warmth. He vowed that no matter how fierce the plague became, he would stand firm. Chapter 4. A community united by hope. Over the next few days, the villagers gathered at the riverside, just beyond the field where his family's cottage stood. The river flowed gently, its surface a ribbon of blue-green light. People formed a long human chain, passing wooden buckets from one to the next. From the riverbank up to the levee on the hillside, each bucket, full of fresh water, was swiftly relayed along the line. The goal was to have a ready supply of water to pour down atop the levee as a barricade of liquid, mixed with herbal decoctions to keep the pestilence from crossing over. From time to time, one of the men at the water's edge would raise his arms and call out, "Hurry! Let no bucket touch the ground. Pass it quickly." Then the bucket would arc through the air to the next person, who would catch it with practiced ease. Soon it reached the top of the levee, where the captain of the watch and a handful of volunteers mixed in bundles of dried mugwort and ginger, splashing the healing brew across the muddy embankment. Amid this rhythmic clatter, buckets colliding, water sloshing, calls of left foot, right foot, and watched from the safety of his home. He remained unsteady on his feet, shivering from weakness, but his heart surged with pride to see every man, woman, and child pulling together. Even the small children, barefoot and wide-eyed, took turns passing the buckets. Roosters crowed in the nearby barns as if heralding their collective effort. Tam hovered by the door of the stall, throat tight with emotion. "Brother, look how everyone's helping," she whispered, and nodded, voice hoarse. "They're protecting the village, just like we prayed. It feels like our hearts are one." Mai, who had returned from gathering more medicinal herbs, knelt beside it. "Drink this tonic," she urged, handing him a steaming bowl of boiled ginger and dandelion. "It will give you strength." And sipped the hot liquid. The zing of ginger cut through his foggy mind, and for the first time in days, he felt warmth radiate from his chest. He watched as his neighbors passed cycle after cycle of water, their faces lit with determination. In that moment, he understood that the village's salvation did not come from one person alone. but from every individual's willingness to unite. Lonvan, the village chief, strode along the levee, directing each shift at the watch post. As he passed, he cupped his hands to his ears. Your survival gave us hope. When I saw you begin to recover, I realized we might have a chance. Keep listening to your heart, my friend. And felt a surge of gratitude course through him. He lifted his voice and called out to the workforce. Everyone, remember this night. We will conquer the darkness together. From the water-bearers to the forge-wielding blacksmiths, from the weavers with their tiny thimbles to the elders chanting prayers by straw braziers, every villager responded with shouts of encouragement. Together we stand. Together we prevail. That evening, as the sky darkened and stars flickered above, the levee was fortified. A final layer of water infused with fragrant herbs glistened under torchlight. Safe for the moment, and returned to the straw stall, where Tam and I waited with steaming broth. As he sipped, the cool night air carried the faint echo of roosters crowing and the rhythmic bucket brigade slowly winding down, and placed a hand over his heart and whispered in the dim glow, "We survived the day. We will survive tomorrow too." Chapter 5, The Legend of the Striped Garment. Though his strength continued to return and remained preoccupied by a single question, why had he been the one to survive? What had protected him when so many others had perished? Each time he looked at the pale yellow cloth wrapped around him, he thought about the pastel-striped tunic he wore during his fevered dreams, a garment woven with alternating pink and light blue threads. Those dream visions persisted. He would stand beneath roosters' cries in sunlit rice fields, that striped tunic billowing in a silent wind. Each time, he felt as though that piece of cloth was infused with a power beyond ordinary fabric. One early morning, Lonvan returned to his stall, still wearing his weathered blue tunic and well-worn hat. He held in his hands a set of tattered documents, the village's archival records. These parchments belonged to the old weaving cooperative once based in Rang Xa, Lonvan explained. Before the Great Plague that decimated Rang Xa years ago, there was a master weaver who was said to worship the roosters that guarded the barnyard. Legend said his cloth held a fragment of royal thread imbued with protective blessings so potent that a single stripe of it could ward off disease. When the plague first arrived, cursed fate caught him unprepared. He took one bolt of cloth and fled into the mountains, never to be seen again. He unrolled the brittle parchment, revealing intricate calligraphy and faded ink illustrations of roosters standing sentinel over bales of rice straw. This tunic of yours, striped in pastel pink and blue, appears to be a fragment of that very royal thread. Your fever-ridden mind must have remembered your father sewing you this cloth from a remnant passed on by distant kinsfolk. That cloth is more than just a keepsake. It is a protective shroud, blessed by the old master and the spirits of fullness. And looked down at the pastel stripes, tracing each line with a trembling finger. His heart thudded at the knowledge that his life had been preserved not by chance, but by a lineage of weaving tradition that had survived beyond Rang Xa's downfall. That's astounding, and muttered. But how did my father come by that cloth? Lonvan closed the scroll. Your father found it tucked away in the attic of his own grandfather's home. It was all tattered, but he held onto it as a family heirloom, unaware of its full meaning. When he sewed those stripes for you, it became part of your destiny. That's why, when you lay there in the straw, you awakened with the strength to resist death's knell, and felt tears well in his eyes, a mix of relief and awe. He pressed the cloth to his chest as though it were the most precious treasure. I will never take this tunic for granted again, he vowed. Lonvan's gaze softened. Neither should you, but do not rely on it alone. The villagers, working together, created a shield of water, incense, and herbal remedies that kept the plague at bay. The cloth gave you a head start, but the whole community's spirit sealed our safety, and stood, resolute. From now on, I will dedicate myself to both preserving the weaving tradition and to ensuring the well-being of everyone here. Chapter 6. A pilgrimage to Rang Xa's abandoned halls. With his constitution fully restored, and Lonvan resolved to revisit Rang Xa, a place once prosperous with looms and dye vats, now lying desolate after the plague. They prepared a small cart loaded with rice and herbal supplies to share with any survivors they might find, along with carefully folded cloth embroidered with pastel stripes as a gift of goodwill. They traveled along the winding riverside roads at dawn, with the cart's wooden wheels clattering on mossy stones. The air was crisp, enlivened by birdsong and the spicy tang of fresh bamboo shoots. The memory of his earlier fevered dreams flickered in N's mind each time he glimpsed a rooster's silhouette against the breaking dawn. By mid-morning, they reached Rang Xas outskirts. A rusted gate, half-caved, creaked as they passed under it. Once, this gate had welcomed merchants and travelers. Now its hinges hung askew. They followed the cracked flagstone path leading to a collapsed barn with a half-intact red tile roof. The golden rooster relief that once crowned the ridge had fallen, leaving only a battered stump of gilded metal. From somewhere within the ruins drifted the faint echo of crows cawing overhead. Lon Van narrowed his eyes. This used to be the center of weaving. Thy pots would sit along that wall. We need to find the old sanctum of the master weaver. Some say it's beneath the central hall, but no one dares explore it. Cautiously, the two crept deeper, stepping around broken timbers and shattered pottery. Dust motes danced in beams of sunlight filtering through holes in the roof. Vines and ferns claimed each surface, their roots creeping between flagstones. In the center of what had once been a grand courtyard, a single weaving loom lay half covered in dust, its shuttle rotted away. Next to it, a faded mural depicted a master weaver sitting cross-legged among glowing roosters, holding a bolt of striped cloth in his lap. The pastel pink and blue threads once bright had faded to ghostly pastel gray, but the pattern was unmistakable. And approached the mural, heart pounding. He gently laid a hand against the image of the master weaver. This was him, he breathed, the one who blessed the cloth. Lon Van looked around uneasily. Legend says an illness overtook him within that very hall. Many of the villagers perished here. Some claim his spirit still walks these halls, guarding the secrets of his craft. And steeled himself, remembering the rituals he had undergone, the 7 sacred rites. He knelt before the remains of the loom and closed his eyes. Folding his hands in prayer, he recited the old invocation from memory. By rooster's vigilance and straw's embrace, bestow your blessing, hold me in grace. A gust of wind stirred through the shattered windows, causing the ivy to clap softly against the wall, and felt a warm, humming current at his fingertips. He opened his eyes to see faint, swirling motes of golden dust gathering above the loom. The dust glowed for a heartbeat, then vanished as the rafters moaned. Lon Van laid a reassuring hand on his shoulder. He has recognized you. The master weaver's spirit welcomes you. Together, they descended a narrow stairway hidden behind a collapsed stone slab. The air grew clammy, tinged with a sweet, moldy scent. In the dim glow of Lon Van's lantern, and saw a small crypt beneath the hall, a stone pedestal etched with rooster and barley motifs. At its center lay a rusted chest, sealed by a wrought iron lock. Within that chest lies the Codex of Textiles, Lon Van whispered. Legends say it contains formulas for dye, weaving patterns, and prayers of protection. If we can restore its contents, we might help villages far beyond ours. Anne's pulse quickened, but the lock is rusted shut. How do we open it? Lon Van produced a slender iron key that had once belonged to Rang Xas village treasurer. This key was passed down to me by my grandfather. He survived the plague and vowed to preserve these secrets for someone worthy. With a trembling hand, Lon Van slid the key into the lock. It turned with a grinding click. The lid creaked open, revealing a single scroll of parchment bound in leather, embossed with pastel stripes barely visible through grime. Carefully, and unrolled it. The Codex's pages contain detailed diagrams of weaving looms, step-by-step instructions for combining pastel pink and blue threads in precise patterns, as well as prayers to be woven into each bolt for protection. Marginal notes in a delicate hand read, "Wear this for your neighbor. Let this cloth guard your village. May the roosters guide your heart." Anne's voice shook as he read. By crafting this cloth, one bonds body and spirit to the living rooster's vigilance, straw's embrace, the plague finds no purchase. Lon Van watched tears form in its eyes. Now we understand. The master weaver wove his faith into every thread, binding healing into the fabric itself. That tunic you wore, and it contained those prayers, those diagrams, those lines of power, and folded the scroll carefully, placing it in his chest. We must bring these instructions back to Tan Hoa, replicate the pattern, and distribute the cloth to neighboring villages. Lon Van nodded. At dawn, we depart. Today, we'll rest in the old caretaker's cottage, then begin our return journey. As they rose from the crypt, the rustle of ghostly roosters echoed in the silence, like a final benediction from a departed master. Chapter 7. Return to Tan Hoa. At first light, Anne and Lon Van retraced their steps across the misty fields toward their home village. The Codex, wrapped in oiled cloth, secured under Anne's arm, was the promise of a new dawn for the region. The countryside was hushed, aside from the soft coo of doves in the steeple of a distant chapel and the faint chirp of sparrows at the weaving cottage they passed. Back at the riverside levee, villagers were already lining up again, but not to pass buckets this time. Instead, they gathered around simple cotton frames and dye vats, and unrolled the codex on a wooden crate, passing out freshly woven skeins of pastel threads in pink and blue. The village's new apprentice weavers, eager youth who had never dared venture into weaving before, inhaled sharply at the sight of these precious, sacred threads. Tam and I stood nearby, offering herbal tea to anyone who came for a closer look. Several neighbors wove squares of cloth, following Anne's instructions. Weave one pastel stripe of pink, then two of blue, repeating. Each stripe must be 5 finger breadths wide. Keep your heart calm. Let the roosters in your mind watch over the warp. Little by little, pastel cloth began to bloom across wooden looms. Bolts of pastel herringbone pattern, pastel pinstripe pattern, pastel crosshatch pattern. The air was thick with the tang of dye, crushed indigo for blue, crushed madder root for pink. As each piece of cloth emerged damp, villagers laid them to dry on bamboo racks facing the sun, and walked along the line, encouraging each weaver, hold the thread wholeheartedly. Let your prayers infuse it. This is more than fabric. This is hope woven into every fiber. When the first bolts of cloth dried to a soft pastel glow, and gathered them and beckoned the villagers to form another human chain, this time passing bundles of viewing cloth instead of buckets of water, they distributed the protective cloth across 4 neighboring villages: Vong Lai Lon, Tui Sun, Sunjia, and ultimately back to Rang Xe. Wherever the pastel cloth was draped over door frames, hung in doorways, or stitched into garments, the villagers reported feeling a sudden calm in their hearts, as if a watchful hen had taken flight above them, glimmering in golden light. As night fell, not a single new case of disease arose in any of the villages that wore the pastel cloth. Word of this miracle spread like wildfire throughout the region. Back in Tan Hoa, at the square before the old barn, the entire village held a festival at dusk. Bamboo torches cast a flickering glow on the throng, and stood on a simple raised platform, wearing his cherished pastel-striped tunic. The codex sat on a small wooden altar behind him. He addressed the gathered crowd. My friends, today we celebrate not only the end of disease, but the power of unity and faith. When our neighbors in Rang Xe fell into despair, this cloth, woven with the Master's prayers, gave us a path forward. Let its pastel stripes remind us that even in the harshest winter, we can weave hope and protection through our communities. I am grateful to share this blessing with every household here. As his words settled over the crowd, the villagers cheered and lit more torches, pressing pastel cloths to their hearts in solemn gratitude. Overhead, roosters crowed from coops nearby in a chorus as if paying homage to and the master weaver's legacy. Tam and I stood at his side, faces bright with pride. Their mother wiped tears from her cheeks as she handed out steaming bowls of chicken porridge to anyone still hungry. Anne's father, with a gentle smile, patted his son's shoulder. You have honored our family's humble roots, he said. Your courage carried the flame of hope through our darkest days. Anne's gratitude swelled. Beneath the glow of torchlight, he bowed deeply in front of the altar. To every sister and brother who passed a basket of water, every mother and father who donated herbs, and every child who held a pastel thread, you are the true guardians of our village. May we never forget this bond. Chapter 8, A New Dawn for the Weavers. In the weeks that followed, the so-called Pastel Weaving Guild sprang to life in Tan Hoa and neighboring hamlets. Villagers who had never touched a loom formed apprentice groups. Elder weavers, some who had fled Rang Xe, returned to teach the ancient craft, weaving protective patterns into every garment they created, and served as guild master, his role less a position of power than a guardian of knowledge. He ensured that all families received a modest supply of pastel cloth so that no household would remain unprotected. One sunny morning, a group of school children, aged 7 to 12, gathered at the guild hall, an open-air pavilion draped in pastel banners, and stood patiently as each child placed a single straw of pastel thread into their spindle for spinning. A boy named Min turned to him with wide eyes. Surin, do you think the pastel stripes will protect me if I get sick? And smiled and knelt to Min's level. These stripes carry the prayers of our ancestors, the faith of our neighbors, and the courage of farmers who shared water along a levee. Yes, they will protect you, as long as you remember to weave your own hope into them. The boy nodded solemnly and returned to his spinning wheel. All around them, children wove bolts of pastel fabric that fluttered in the spring breeze. The guild hall soon brimmed with bolts of cloth in pastel pink and blue patterns, each piece a living testament to the community's faith and resilience. Tam, who had become the guild's head scribe, recorded every pattern and prayer verse in a new illuminated codex. She sketched roosters, ripe straw sheaves, and stylized rice grains in gold leaf margins, ensuring that future generations would benefit from this knowledge. My now respected herbalist opened a small apothecary at the edge of the guild hall. She specialized in potions and salves made from the region's medicinal plants, ginger, dandelion, mugwort. And from that day forward, she began stitching tiny pastel symbols into each jar's label, symbolizing protection. Anne's mother tended her own modest weaving loom in the corner of the family's modest home, weaving pastel cloth into strips that she then sold at the market for a handful of coins. These coins, traded for rice and salt, helped fund the guild's expansion. She would often pause in her weaving, gaze out at the sunrise, and say a silent prayer of thanks for her son's safe return from fever. Anne's father joined the guild as its first apprentice blacksmith. Though he had always worked the fields, he now hammered simple loom parts, shuttles, heddles, and heddle rods from wrought iron. His steady, rhythmic hammering rang through the courtyard as he forged each piece, knowing that each iron rod he crafted would help someone's weaving stand strong through many seasons. Between the walls of the guild hall, and prepared lesson plans for aspiring weavers. Each evening, as the sky turned tangerine, he would gather everyone for a demonstration: how to weave the standard pastel striped pattern, how to adjust tension on the warp threads, how to mix crushed indigo and madder root dyes to achieve the perfect pastel hues. His voice would rise and fall in gentle cadences. Place one pink thread, then two blue threads. Adjust your shuttle so that it oscillates smoothly. Keep your wrist relaxed, and imagine the rooster's call guiding your hand. Let your breath follow the rhythm of your loom. So did the pastel weaving guild thrive. Soon, pillows and shawls woven in pastel patterns began to appear along the dusty paths of other villages. Travelers who once feared leaving their homes now wore pastel-dyed scarves as talismans. Parents tucked pastel patches into their children's collars as they headed off to school. The memory of the plague lingered, but the threat seemed to recede whenever villagers wove or touched those pastel threads.